Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be for all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth. Welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I'm your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of western Georgia on this October 28th, 2025. Well, it's everyone's favorite show. I say that every time. It's Open Lines, Open Topics. Again, this season, we always try to throw two of them in there because you guys have so many great questions. And so tonight, on our semi-Halloween special, I guess you could call this one, we'll be taking your questions, your comments, and any of your stories, anything that's on your mind, we will talk about tonight on Vestiges After Dark. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Vestiges After Dark. Once again, I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, here with my co-host, Jamie Wolfe.
Good evening, everyone. How are y'all doing?
I hope you guys are ready for tonight with your questions. So you can start putting them into the chat room right now, and I'll have the phone number up on the screen in the second and third hours so that you guys can call in. It's always better when you call into the show. But of course, you can ask your questions and start logging them in the various chat rooms all across the internet, anywhere we are simulcasting this broadcast, be it YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch. We're out there, and you can use any of those chat modules to ask a question. Our moderators will look for them and bring them to our attention. So it's what makes this show so much fun. Really, it is. And, I know that there's been a lot of theology, I think, to digest this season in particular. It turned in, and we didn't try to make it a theologically heavy season, but it sort of turned that way with the annihilationism episode. And we do have a question on that tonight. So we'll be getting to that in questions from the ether here in a moment. And we're also, because it is Open Lines, Open Topics, we decided to do a liturgical libation. This is a wonderful 2005 Sauterne. Cheers. I think it's Jamie's first time.
He's made a believer out of me.
You like Sauterne, don't you?
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
I like things sweet anyway, so perfect.
Sweet and rotten, right? That's how you like it.
Rotten and sweet. Spoil them rotten.
It's the noble rot, as they call it. And it's wonderful. It's a fantastic wine from Bordeaux. Yeah, it is. It's very special. Excellent with foie gras or something of that nature, something fatty. It really cuts through the fat beautifully. It's usually served with that, or you can actually have it with a dessert. But I think having it with something sweet kind of ruins it for me. I think I like it with like the contrast between the savory fat and that's the way I like it. But it's also a wonderful social wine. Just for
think about a duck breast, a duck.
You could do that because of the fat, but I mean, you render out a lot of the fat. But I mean, you could do that. I mean, typically a Burgundy or
some reason I think duck would be good with it.
You could. I mean, I could see how it would happen. It depends, I think, on how it's prepared.
Yes.
But I think, strictly speaking, it's considered to be sort of a dessert wine. But I mean, I think it's more versatile than just
it's dessert all by itself.
It's far more versatile than port. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
I think, but it's different from port. And it's more delicate than port. Definitely does not hold as well as port. I mean, you can keep a Sauterne for decades if you have it properly stored at cellar temperature. But if you If you don't, it starts going brown and it's ruined. Port, you can abuse port. You
save
can you can
No
you
matter
can
what you do to it.
you can leave it out in the sun for 20 years. It'd still be drinkable. Port is just really robust. I guess like the Portuguese people, they're very resilient people. So I think their
Keep
wine
it in a
reflects
cool,
that.
dry, dark place.
That's right. All right, joining us from Australia, we have Father Chris Yates tonight. How you doing, Father?
I'm doing well. I've had a kind of nice but hectic weekend. My wife won an award at a conference, and amongst the speakers there was Dave Rubin.
Okay.
So I spent some time chatting with Dave Rubin from the Rubin Report, and Andrew Neil, who is a legend in British journalism. So editor of The Spectator, The Economist. He's been. I did actually say it to him. My wife warned me I shouldn't, but I said, I've grown up with you. Which is kind of reminding him he's old, right? Because I've got white hair, and I started watching it when I was. But it was really good. So, and he's famous for sort of. Ben Shapiro ran out on an interview with him once in a huff.
He scared off Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, well, Ben misread the room. Ben called him some BBC lefty, and this is the editor of The Spectator. He's not a lefty.
Right.
he was just being an actual journalist, which Ben was very unfamiliar with. So, actually, I should credit Shapiro. He did, in fact, apologise for that. He said I got it wrong. Anyway, but so I had a kind of crazy weekend meeting at least one of my idols anyway, in Andrew Neil. And so that's why I got my Thomas Sowell top on. He's also just released a new video with Peter Robinson that's worth listening to. So talking about his life rather than his books. So
Beautiful.
94, still going. He's got a book coming out.
I got all kinds of love for Thomas Sowell. So.
Oh, he's just awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, big crazy. But other than that, it's like it's raining in 60 and 61 Fahrenheit here, so it's a weird kind of day for this time.
That's
of year.
about our weather right now.
Yeah, it's
raining
cooler.
and 61. That's about what we've been doing. Well, it's getting cold at night. It's been getting to the 30s at night, but during the day it gets up to about 60, and it's been wet.
So it's freak weather.
Yeah, freak weather. Yeah, definitely for both of us.
Everybody's sniffling.
Yes, and I hate that because that's when you get your colds. It's when it transitions like that and it kind of stays that way and it gets a little wet. It takes adjustment. I don't know why it does it, but it does it. Just
I get it too.
You
For
get
a
it
few
too?
days, I'm miserable.
Yeah, just the way it is. Just take your vitamins and you'll get through it. That's the best way.
I had conference cold. Like you go to a conference and everyone gets the same cold.
Yeah.
Right.
But actually, it does work. I came back and took double the vitamins you're supposed to take, and it's warded it off. So
that whole thing that I tell everybody, I've said on the show,
zinc,
zinc, quercetin,
D.
D,
D3.
Particularly if you're you're getting into the summer months, so you're going to get some natural D. But I mean, if you're not sitting out in the sun or getting a lot of sun exposure, then taking a good D supplement is really important. 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C.
Australians have chronically low vitamin D levels
because they stay out of the sun, right?
Well, because of the sun cancer campaign has been so successful that everyone puts sun cream on all the time, which means they get no vitamin D whatsoever. So not I. I hate putting cream on my skin.
It's not good. It's actually not good for you either.
Sun. Everybody's got to get some sun.
Sunscreen's actually not good for your body. It actually introduces chemicals into your body that are not healthy. But then again, it's like, I guess it's like anything else. It's having to balance. Like
pick your poison.
Pick your poison. My wife has
plugging up your pores with chemicals.
My wife has this. I mean, she is. I don't consider myself really white because I really inherited most of this the Mediterranean skin from my Italian side and.
Your wife's
my friend,
like me, she's blue.
Yes, pretty much. Yes. So she burns just by looking at a flashbulb. I mean, it's like she just burns from anything. So she does need it. I mean, she couldn't even enjoy a swimming pool if she didn't use it. But I don't care for it. I only will put it on if I know I'm going to be in the sun all day. And it's like, I'm just gonna. I don't want to get burned. It's not really so much about avoiding skin cancers as much as I just don't enjoy being burned. But it takes a lot to burn this skin. I mean, I'd have to be in it all day for at least 3 or 4 hours before I start getting red. She can just
goes a long way. There's a reason Mick Dundee wears that hat.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, hat does work.
I've got one of those.
Yeah,
they do work.
Yeah, it's good. Joining us from Tennessee, we have Brandon Milam. How you doing tonight, Brandon?
I'm pretty good. One of my favorite holidays is coming up, so I went ahead and wore my as Halloween shirt as I can get.
Yeah, the plague. I see it. You got the plague doctors
plague
on there.
hanging out on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you're ready to ward against all those nasty viruses that are out there right now, huh?
Haven't had it yet, but I think my time's coming.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm due. I haven't been sick in years, and I know that's bizarre, but it's been since I've been doing the vitamin regimen, and honestly, I really do not get sick anymore because of that. Ever since I started it, I mean,
I take
really,
emergency twice a day.
Yeah, that's good.
When I start to feel icky, so I'll take a packet in the morning, a packet at night.
Yeah,
and
it helps.
Eat good whole food.
Yeah, it helps.
A little hot toddy before bed,
Tracy said in the chat there, she says, I'm so white. When I was a toddler, my mom thought I had put blue marker on my arms. And she's like, nope, just my veins.
That's white.
It's not, she's not kidding. She's not even exaggerating.
Oh,
That's
goodness.
really a true story. Oh my goodness. I don't have this on. Why don't I have this on? Okay. I don't understand why that's not running. I pushed it, but it didn't go. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is the recorder's not working. It for some reason it didn't take when I pushed the button. So I'm going to have to download this episode and convert it to an MP3. So anyway, the audio only version of this show will be a little late today because of that. I don't know why it didn't do it. I hate when that happens, but I didn't notice it till now, and it's too late to start over.
It's tech.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started tonight with questions from the ether. Now, I want to preface this one because we got a couple questions. One was from April. That is basically a continuation of the annihilationism episode, or the two annihilationism episodes. She asked a question that's a really good one that I think will kind of sum it all up and reel it in, I should say, to the well, I mean, it really kind of bookends the entire story of annihilationism and everything that we've discussed about it, and it kind of wraps it up really nicely. So we're going to get to that one. But before we do, Jay had a question on the Nicolaitan Network that was several questions, several somewhat long and nuanced questions that I said, the best way to answer this is not in a post, because I'm not going to write a dissertation on the Nicolaitan Network. But I don't mind, addressing each one of these questions on the questions from the ether segment, particularly since today is open lines, open topics. So it really works for this show to kind of get us started with this. So she saw a Facebook post that had a list of things that said, hey, you know what else, what's really not in the Bible that you've been told it is? And here's this list. So she wanted to know how accurate the post was. And the reality of it is that each one of these has a somewhat nuanced answer. Not something that I really had the time to really spend to write it out. So we're going to get to all of those. So Brandon, what I'd like for you to do is to start off perhaps with each one at a time. Let's do Jay's first. We'll do April's last, even if we have to run into the second hour for April's. I don't think it will take the entire segment to get through all of these, but just in case it does, we're going to go through it. So we have more than a half hour here to answer this. So again, just go through each one and we're going to answer them the best that we can.
All right. So to start, they said that the Bible never said 3 wise men came bearing gifts. It just said wise men from the east.
Well, it said magi from the east bearing 3 gifts.
3 gifts.
And that's where they inferred that each one brought their own. So frankincense, myrrh, and gold. Okay. So that's where we get the 3 from, because they were 3 gifts that came. Now, theoretically, yeah, I guess you could say there was 10 guys and they all brought 3 of these gifts, or you could say that it was 2 guys that brought this 3 gifts. It's possible, but it's not really important. It's not really an important theological, historical factor here. The fact is that the three gifts, frankincense, myrrh, and gold, represent the roles of Christ in our lives. So frankincense is his priestly duty to us. Myrrh is his sacrifice for us. Gold is his kingly nature. And that he is the
priest, prophet, and king.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what's important, is that there were three gifts, not that there were three wise men bearing gifts. But tradition says it was three. They even have names, don't they? Like Balthazar,
Caspar, Balthazar, Melchior.
Melchior. Yeah, thank you, Melchior.
Yeah, I wouldn't remember that.
Yeah, I couldn't remember Caspar was on the tip of my tongue. I couldn't remember Melchior though. But yeah, so they even have names that tradition has assigned to them. Was it these historical figures? It doesn't matter. What matters is what the lesson is teaching you. Okay, and that's what this is teaching.
Yeah, it's Holy Tradition, kind of reinforcing something by means that aren't, as you said. Nobody in the creed stands up and says, and I believe in Caspar, Balthazar, and Melchior.
Right.
But it's a way of reinforcing the more important narrative, which is, there are three gifts. And of course, as you said, what the three gifts are. There is, by the way, a lovely, and I think this might be uniquely English, because when I came to Australia, it was news to them, tradition of, on the feast of, Epiphany. Sorry, tired head. On the Feast of the Epiphany, we bless water and chalk in the church, and people go home, and with the blessed chalk, they write on C plus M plus B and the year. So Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar, and the year. And on churches across England, you'll see this written, sometimes with a crown on one side, for the king. But and so you write that on your doorpost. It's kind of echoing that Old Testament.
Never heard of that.
I think it might be uniquely English. And when you grow up in a culture, you don't really know which
cool.
of it is just yours. But I sort of certainly reintroduced it in Australia, and it took off because it's a great thing to do. So there you've got the extension of the three wise men, the three gifts, and now also that blessing comes to your home, which is what happens every time someone receives Christ.
Beautifully said. Okay, so what's our next one from this list?
So the next one, Lucifer wasn't thrown out alone. Third of heaven followed him.
Okay, now this comes from Revelation chapter 12, I believe, where it describes a dragon sweeping a third of the stars, and that third being cast down. It is true that the name Lucifer is not used in that passage, but again, the Bible has never been read in isolation. This is the big problem with Protestantism and sola scriptura style theology, is that a lot of pastors and evangelicals and Christians of these flavors of Christianity think that you can just take a Bible verse, and because it has some kind of meaningful application to you, and you can say that universally this is what it means in all circumstances, but it was never read this way. This is why, again, the magisterium of the church, love it or hate it, is an important and necessary thing, because what that does is it helps to keep the cohesive nature of Scripture together so that it doesn't start falling apart by everyone, quoting this and quoting that and using it in different ways. So when it comes to something like this, it was traditionally understood that this is a symbolic representation of the fall of the angels. Now, we know that this largely comes from also extra canonical sources, the book of Enoch, particularly, where we get a lot of that extra stuff on the angels and how the demons fell. And, and of course, the dragon has always been associated with the devil, Satan, whatever. And Lucifer's the common name that people like to use. So it would not be unrealistic for somebody teaching this maybe even to children, and saying, if you're teaching a religious education class to kids, trying to teach them theology without getting too complicated, you might say this is the devil, or this is Lucifer being, thrown out of heaven and took a third of the angels with him. But this is where that comes from. So, when they're saying, this is why I said these things require a nuanced answer, because even though, yes, the literal thing that this person is saying is not in the Bible, literally the way that he's writing it, the concepts are derived from the Bible and are utilized by theologians of the last 2,000 years to understand and reflect this. So it's not exactly right also to say that these things are not in the Bible, because these are the verses that inspire these ideas. Father, anything you can think about the third of heaven following the dragon?
Well, all I'd say is I don't think they had their logarithm out calculating exactly what 1/3 was.
Yeah, I mean, particularly when you're deriving your theology from the book of Revelation. Revelation is entirely a symbolic book.
I do have a kind of my own sort of Dreamtime interpretation of this, though, which is to say, we believe that God is 3 in 1. Mm-hmm. The Holy Trinity. The 1 in 3 is sort of the reverse of that. So the image of the Trinity is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So completely bounded by the unity of love, that they are in fact a single, that one God and not 3. That the 1 in 3 is sort of the reverse of that, which is and the fall from heaven is about self-worship, it's about the ego, and so you've got this sort of image of Lucifer, the light bringer, the most cherished of the angels, who becomes turned in on himself. And I actually kind of like the imagery of that. It was the fact that human beings were made able to co-create with God, in other words, that they could reproduce, where the angels couldn't, that his ego simply couldn't bear it, that these animals would be allowed to co-create with God, whereas these angelic beings of which he was supreme couldn't, and therefore his ego, the 1 in 3, being the converse of the 3 in 1. But that's just my little I don't know.
I think that's actually really good. I mean, no, I think that is probably where they might have been going with it, because Revelation was very much trying to write in code, Christian code that Christians could pick up on. It stands to reason that would be. Yeah.
Not Gnostic code.
No. Just try not to get killed
just
code.
To clarify. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
We got to write this secretly because we could be killed for it. Yeah, that kind of code.
Because we can receive martyrdom, but we're not allowed to throw ourselves at it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. All right, what's our next one?
I'm going to say just one other thing I did want to add, because I did research that and it fascinates me, but the problem is, and it's not specific to just the King James, but I'm going to have to kind of say it is because it's the more popular one. But what you have in Isaiah 14:12 is you have the entire verse translated but one word, which is Lucifer. It's never used as a name. And even you have Latin literature, De Natura Deorum, or On the Nature of the Gods, where the word Lucifer is used for the planet Venus.
Right.
I think that's where we get kind of mixed up. Where is it a term? Is it a name? It's my opinion.
So much of this is semantics. That's one of the things that we're trying to address with the annihilationism, is that you could actually say the same thing and sound like you're disagreeing, because things like words like soul and spirit have been interchanged in so many ways that we really don't even know what they mean anymore. It's why I'm trying to force myself to more commonly use the Greek terms, because I think it's more accurate to kind of stick to what the ancients meant by these things. And this is where we get them anyway. It's not like these terms were our own and we applied them to these ancient terms. No, everything we know.
But the experience is our own.
It is.
We're using language to explain and explore things which we intrinsically experience. So But well, just like we say the word love for all sorts of things in English, which Greek has better words for. A more sort of distinct forms of those love. But I think we should be careful to say that the way these things are described have their origin in history and time and people, but the experiences themselves are as old as humanity.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. But I do think when we're talking strict theology, trying to answer the mysteries and the questions,
then we have to be precise.
We should be as precise as possible, and perhaps educate the layperson, be like, okay, well, words matter. And what the ancients saw as soul is not quite how we see it today, or what it means. And sometimes we say soul when they meant spirit, and that was a big difference back then, that kind of thing. And that applies here too with Lucifer.
You mentioned the effect of sola scriptura as well.
Yeah.
Because that's a doctrine that I completely reject, and I know you do as well.
Very much so.
And of course, those who are sola scriptura say, oh yeah, you see, you don't believe in the Bible, and think that, no, it's not, that's a false binary. But obviously Brandon's questions are steeped in the fact that he's been immersed in that tradition, just like I didn't realize people in Australia didn't use chalk on Epiphany to bless their houses. All of the questions are couched in, but in the King James version of the Bible, this word is used and this is not. It's like, well, so what? Happy to answer the question, obviously, to develop people away from actually something which when Luther spoke about sola scriptura, this isn't what he intended at all, I don't think. So happy, don't get me wrong, the questions are legitimate and right to be asked, but the paradigm shift away from that makes you think every time you ask a question like that, I'm like, can I get that agitated about that? And I forget that other people are,
Oh yeah, I get that completely. I think it's even more important now is what I think what I'm basically getting at is now that we're 2,000 years into all this, I think it's even more important that we truly understand, because we are 2,000 years culturally removed from the mind of these ancient thinkers. And I think people, particularly the arrogant Christians out there, the evangelical type of Bible only people who think that, they get it and they are capable of sharing it, the right way at least. And I think they really do not consider just how much they think they know that they really don't know, just on the basis that they think it. And that's when the Bible starts to become more idol than inspiration, if that makes sense. All right, what's our next one, Brandon?
So the next one is hell wasn't created for humans. It was made for the devil and his angels.
Oh, this is a good one, because this did not come up during the annihilation.
Was hell made?
Well, see, that's interesting, because it doesn't say made, it says prepared. And where this derives from is Matthew 25:41. The eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Does not say the damned. That gets inferred from other things that Jesus talks about. But this is when we start to talk about, and we talked about this with annihilation, so that's what I was trying to say, is that we use, just like for love, we'll use hell for everything.
Yeah.
Okay, we use hell for Sheol. We use hell for Gehenna. We use hell for the second death. We use hell for the lake of fire. All right. And I would argue that conceptually, these are very different things, particularly Sheol, but we use the word hell for all of it. And they were not the same concept. Now, I could get very esoteric here, in continuation of what we talked about with annihilationism, that I would argue. Father Chris gave you his little personal interpretation on the 1/3 versus the Holy Trinity, and how it's like a
zero authorization,
interpretation. That's right.
Just my thoughts.
So I'm going to give you Bishop Bryan's theological interpretation on this one as an esoteric Catholic, okay? Because I think there's definitely some major validity here. You guys can sit with it and see what you think. And I presented it to my students because there are things in the esoteric tradition and the Western mystery tradition that I can't get into right now, but a lot of this study has what brought me to this particular realization that I'm going to share with you right now, and why I maintain this one. I actually think it's the correct answer, but I'm going to explain this to you to see what you all think, because I shared it with my students. It's time for you guys now, my audience. All right. What is when we're talking about the fires of hell, whether it be the eternal fire in Matthew chapter 25, or if we're talking about Gehenna, the fires of Gehenna, or the lake of fire, or the purifying fire of purgatory, what is that fire? Now, I'm going to posit that I would suggest that the fire of hell, and by hell, we're going to use the generic English concept here, which it sort of lumps it all into one thing. You could say, the alternative to going to heaven from a modern Christian standpoint. Okay, let's not talk about the annihilationism just yet. But you've got hell, and it's equated to fire, and the New Testament reinforces this imagery. So what is that fire? Well, I'm going to first suggest that the purifying fire of purgatory and the destroying or eradicating or punishing or torturing fire of hell, whichever interpretation of hell you take, are actually the same fire.
I agree.
You agree? Yeah. I don't think they're two separate things. And this is why I say purgatory is not a place
it's the light of heaven.
Well, now you're getting you're getting one step ahead of me, because I agree. I agree on that. I'm going to even give you one on this one. And I think Father Chris is going to agree with this one. I'm going to suggest that the fire that you're encountering, this is why purgatory is not a place and hell's not a place. These are not locations you go. These are experiences you have based upon your particular condition. So if your condition is the grace of salvation, but still holding on to attachments that lead to imperfection, well, that has to be eliminated from you before you can enter into the kingdom, because nothing imperfect can enter the kingdom. Fair enough. That's good Christian theology. So purgatory exists as the means to burn away the remaining imperfections. Now, because by virtue of that grace of eternal life, salvation that you've received through the grace of the cross that Jesus died on for your sake, you now are inherently immortal. And I'm talking about it in the universal Christian theology sense, not the annihilationism sense. We'll talk about that later. And therefore, the fire cannot destroy you. It just burns away the imperfections. Anything that is not immortal, anything that is corruptible, is removed in that moment. That's purgatory. It hurts, but it's there it hurts because you don't want to let go, not because they're part of you. It's that you haven't learned to separate yourself from it. But once purgatory's fire is complete, then you enter into the kingdom. But what if you don't have the grace to endure that fire? What if you don't have the gift of eternal life that the cross gives you because of damnation, because you chose not to pursue salvation? Well, then the fire consumes you. And now we'll call that hell. It's the same fire. But what is the fire? What is that? Is it something that God created for, a place that you go? No. What happened when Moses encountered God and God said, do not look because you will surely die. And Moses was actually burnt on one side. The fire, the face of God is in a consuming fire that will destroy us. Nothing imperfect can look at the face of God. That's why we need Jesus, because Jesus can become like us so that we can interact with God on a level that won't kill us. But if we were to interact with the Father directly, this is what ends up happening, okay? That's the face of God. So I would say that the fire of hell and the fire of Gehenna and the lake of fire and the second death and the fire, the eternal fire that is prepared for the devil and all his angels, and the fire of purgatory that purifies you from your remaining imperfections, is the face of God looking at you. which is why hell would be eternal torture to a person who doesn't like God, because it's looking at the face of God and you can't stand it. And the same with purgatory being the fire that forces you away from your attachments or your imperfections. It's the same fire. So I would say that there is no fire of hell. I would say that is the face of God. And whether it's hell or purgatory or heaven is up to where you are in your particular state with God. If you hate God, well, then it's going to be hell. If you have a lot of attachments, you're not ready for heaven, but you have the grace of salvation, well, then you're going to have to burn away all that before you're able to go in. And you die in a state of perfect grace, you're welcomed into the light of God's face, and it's a wonderful thing because it won't consume you. You become part of it. That's the theosis that we talk about in the East. It's the beatific vision that we talk about in the West. So I don't think when we say hell wasn't created for heavens, it was made for the devil. I don't think hell was made at all. Father Chris, you're already way ahead of it. I don't think hell was made at all. I don't think there is such a thing or a place. I think it's a condition that's caused by where you stand with God. I think the fire of hell is God's face. It really is. Yeah, I do.
It's the silver furnace 7 times refined.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying it reminds me of the passage of being put into the silver, being purified 7 times in the furnace.
Yeah, yeah.
Look, it fits into all. I think this is the image of heaven, hell, and purgatory. The Orthodox Church does stress this teaching more. They're actually better at, because they follow the sort of teachings of the fathers. They emphasize this teaching of the fathers, and I think that's a good thing. Because it makes sense of the beatific vision itself and of all the other sort of really like traditionalist Catholic points of view. Even Fulton Sheen, who says, the difference between purgatory and hell is that purgatory is suffering for the sake of salvation. So in other words, it's like medicine that tastes disgusting but heals you, as opposed to hell, which is suffering for the sake of suffering.
Yes,
and that it's self-imposed. That what you're suffering is because you have rejected God and you're turned in yourself for all eternity because you can't forgive yourself. I think this is the best image of something. We're trying to use language to describe something which is beyond time and space, and because we're creatures of time and space, we find that difficult. But I think this is the best image of what we mean by heaven, hell, and purgatory.
I agree, and regardless of how you want to interpret the ultimate eschatology here, whether you take the more annihilationist stance that I have, or if you take the more traditional stance that the church takes, at least more in that traditional theological standpoint, then I think this fits in both directions. It fits for both of them, which makes it, I think, more likely to be true because there's less that you can argue with there. It just sort of makes good sense from all perspectives involved. So there must be some truth there. All right, what's our next one?
Next one is the serpent in the Garden of Eden could speak before the curse, and an apple was never mentioned. It just said fruit.
Okay, so yes, there's no apple. In fact, most, I think, historians think it was probably a pomegranate, not an apple. The apple thing, that's just that just became attached much, much later, several hundred years later. And maybe even more than that. I don't even think, I'm not even sure medieval. I'd have to check this. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm not even sure medieval theologians talked about it in terms of an apple. I think it's more modern than that. But that is kind of how people refer to it when they're, referencing it, apple tree kind of thing. I don't think apple trees, were really on the mind of the author of Genesis.
It was translated as that in the authorized version, and so we have lots of creative tradition associated with it. Hymns and madrigals. It's developed alongside our culture, and so it's as it's as convenient to say apple as not, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The important thing is not the genus of fruit that was on the tree. The important thing is that it gave us consciousness and the ability to know right from wrong and the consequences of that. Whether even atheists accept that imagery as useful, the fact that we know we can discern right from wrong is why we are moral beings.
Yes. As far as the talking serpent, I would just say that that's just not explained in any, it's sort of just accepted as speaking precurse. And you got to remember also that the story of Adam and Eve is perhaps the ultimate allegory. So you're going to have inconsistencies if you're reading it as history. Reading it like as if it's some kind of historical record, you're going to miss the entire point of it. You might as well not bother. So those kinds of things are not going to matter so much. Apple, speaking serpents, that kind of thing is not really relevant. Again, it's a theological story. It's something to describe an event, perhaps, yes, but an event that is ineffable outside of the context of what humanity understands to be today. And so therefore, the only way to really address some of this ineffable wisdom of God is to convey it in allegory or metaphor, because our minds can wrap our heads around that easier than trying to understand something that is so beyond us that no one gets the point. And that's really all that is. I wouldn't worry too much about that. But again, it's not really important for somebody to list this off as saying, see, the Bible doesn't say this. It's kind of like, I mean, really, you're mincing words now. That's just silliness. But okay, what's our next one?
So the next one is Jesus was not born in December.
Well, yeah,
we know that. I mean, no, I don't think any biblical historian, Catholic or otherwise, teaches that he was historically born in December. The reason December 25th was chosen as the liturgical celebration date for the Feast of the Nativity is because the more ancient feast of the Annunciation, where
it's 9 months before.
It's 9 months before it, March 25th. Now that did exist in the ancient church. Christmas wasn't celebrated till much later, believe it or not. But the Annunciation was celebrated very early on, perhaps one of the earliest feasts, and it was March 21st. So, 25th rather. Sorry, March 25th. So if you're, going to now say, well, we need a feast for Jesus's birth. Well, naturally, what you're going to be like, well, it's go 9 months after the Feast of the Annunciation when he was conceived, and that will be the date. They were not trying to say he was born in December. No one would know that. The Bible doesn't record that. All of the theologians going back to the beginning knew that no one knew what this date, because it wasn't important. It wasn't even, the nativity of Jesus wasn't really important in the early church. That came about a couple hundred years after the fact. What was important is that he came here, he was incarnated, and the way that he incarnated through the Virgin and through her willing acceptance of it. Like so
many people get the nativity wrong.
Yeah.
They think, on Christmas Day we celebrate the incarnation. No, we celebrate the incarnation at the Annunciation.
Yeah, because that's when he was conceived.
Flesh.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of certain views on we don't need to get into it, but on abortion.
It could be.
They might suit better to celebrate the incarnation at the nativity instead of the Annunciation. But the as you said, the nativity is. I mean, the really important. There are three most important things about the life of Jesus. Actually, his teaching isn't one of them. That becomes important.
Yeah.
But it's important because of these three things. God becomes a man. That's the incarnation. God dies on a cross. The God-man dies on a cross, and he rises from the dead.
Yes.
They're the three most important things about Jesus. Who he is, and they're the ultimate achievements and the reason for him coming here. And because of those three things, that's why we take his teaching seriously. Because now we know he's God, so therefore what he said is really important.
It's important, yeah. You're right. I mean, I don't like when he gets reduced down to just a teacher. That's very problematic for me, because, again, it tells me that the person saying that is missing the point entirely. All right.
Actually, just as an aside, when people complain about calling me father, Not, and I really don't care what people call me. I've been called a lot worse on the streets of London as a policeman, I can assure you.
I bet.
But people never have a problem with the word teacher. It's in the same context, of course.
Yes, of course.
Like so I always find it interesting how selective that is. That ultra Protestants don't like the term father. Or people
because it said something, told no one but your heavenly Father above. It's from that. Again, completely missing the point.
Also says not to call anybody a teacher either.
Yeah, I know, right?
Like rabbi, obviously. But
yeah. They don't get bent out of shape on that one, though.
Like micromanaging
they have to be called
scripture.
professor, aren't they?
Yeah. What'd you say?
Happy to be called professor.
Yeah, no, I was saying it's comical how they try to micromanage scripture.
Oh yeah,
they pick one little word out of it and try to blow the whole thing out of the water when it's their ignorance that they completely just don't get it.
Then they want to micromanage how you think about it.
Right.
They're not satisfied with you having your own view.
Just pick any sentence out of the Bible anywhere, open it up, put your finger down, read the passage, and you're going to twist it to your paradigm.
Yep. That's exactly right. Okay, what's our next one?
Yep. Next one is the word Trinity never appears in the Bible.
That is correct. It was not in the Bible. The concept is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but that is a theological term that was developed to, I guess, make it, I would guess, to make it easier to talk about so you don't have to keep saying Father, Son, and Holy Spirit constantly. You could say the Holy Trinity, as an overall pervading concept as they developed the idea of God. This came about under Tertullian in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. The doctrine is, though, in Scripture. It's just not, that word Trinity is not in there. And who cares? The concept is...
Why would it be?
Why would it be? Yeah, why would it be? Why would you think it needs to be? I mean, it's such a ridiculous...
The word transubstantiation isn't in the Bible either. It doesn't mean that we don't believe in the real presence of Christ in the sacrament. The word Chris Yates isn't in the Bible, but Chris Yates exists.
Mm-hmm.
These things, again, these are problems of sola scriptura. And you see, we even have atheist sola scripturists. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got people who reject Christianity, who are very hostile to Christianity, and they do so in a sola scriptura way.
Mm-hmm. They sure do.
So they're still Protestants, even though they're atheists.
That's a good way to put it. All right, what's our next one?
Next one is Satan still appears before God in the book of Job.
Yes, and this is because in the book of Job, Satan is represented as part of God's court, not in opposition to it. This gets us into a lot of, again, the theology of surrounding how the devil evolved and what it started out as, which was very different than what Christians consider. Now, all of this got attached onto these Old Testament concepts, but let's make no mistake about it. There is no devil in Judaism. There isn't. Plain and simple. I know I get in trouble for this, but the Catholic Answers would hate me because they actually, I know, right? Catholic Answers actually had an article about this very thing not too long ago. So if they're listening right now, they're going to hate me again for this one. But I think it's absolutely impossible to suggest, and they do suggest this, but I would say it's impossible to suggest that our concept of the devil as a competitor to God, to say that it didn't come from Zoroastrianism. It absolutely did. It did not come from Judaism. It came from outside influences. Now, Catholic Answers was arguing that this proves that the devil exists because look at all the religions like Zoroastrianism that recognize that there's this ultimate evil. But I don't think there is such a thing as an ultimate evil outside of the Yetzer Hara that we very much fully participate in through our own will. The problem you get into when you start making the devil too important in Christianity is that you start to forget that the devil's already defeated and he doesn't really matter anymore. Mm-hmm. And the only reason why you still have to contend with him is because you keep feeding him out of your own fear and sin. But as soon as you wake up and realize that he has no hold on you and no power over you, Christ defeated him, it's done. It's a done deal. Well, then you get to catch up to God's level and you can move on. But I guess a lot of these kinds of Christians haven't moved on yet. Again, Satan is not in the Old Testament an opposer to God. He is a sort of like a prosecuting attorney that works for the courts to sort of test men, to test their fortitude. God allows Satan to do what he does to Job to test Job's fortitude. Again, it's an allegorical story too. It's not a history. So when you get into the sola scriptura, like we've been talking about, then it becomes more problematic for you, because now you're wanting to look and say that this was an event that happened versus a story that's telling you something about the nature of how God works. And that, again, you miss the point when you do that. So yes, technically speaking, I mean, that is right. Satan does appear before God and works for God and is part of his court, because that's what real Satan is. The word Satan itself is not the devil.
It's devil's advocate.
It's really the devil's advocate, right? Literally. I mean, it's one who opposes or stands in opposition to, but not to God, but to ourselves, in the sense that it becomes an obstacle, an accuser. It means accuser, actually.
That's what Satan means, right?
Accuser.
Satan means accuser.
Accuser.
Yes,
yeah.
But in the sense that anytime you see the word Satan used in the Old Testament, it's something that's standing in the way of a person at a pivotal point where God's will is being compromised by the decision that individual makes. Now, Christians like to look at that and say, oh, that's the devil seducing and tempting them to do the wrong thing. But that's not what the Jewish people were writing. That came about with Christian understandings much, much later. What the Jewish people or the original Jewish authors were trying to write here was to show how our conscience works, in that we have this little voice in our head that tells us to do the right thing, and we constantly disobey it by doing self-interested things instead. That our conscience ultimately does know what we should be doing, but we choose to not follow it because self-serving interests get in the way. And that's what that comes from. And so the Satan is this accuser to accuse you of doing this. All right, very different from this beastly creature that is so powerful that he's just going to steal your soul and take you to hell, which a lot of Christians believe in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The devil's got my soul. He stole my soul. I sold it to him.
Like any of that could happen.
No, he didn't. But
and if you don't believe me, read Brandon's book. He goes into more detail about it than I do. So, what's your book called? Let's plug it right now. What's your book called again, Brandon?
The Devil's Advocate.
See?
Well, there you go.
There it is. There it is.
Devil's free Advocate. Plug earlier. Didn't even know it.
Yeah. There you go.
So the only thing else that I would add is if someone engages with the Old Testament and they look in the book of Job and they translate Hasatan as Satan, the devil, that's going to open up a whole bunch of other problems, because in the Old Testament, you have an angel who's understood as a Satan, an adversary to Balaam. Yes,
that's what I was getting at. Yeah, the one that stands in opposition is the Satan, and then you have but also accuser. Yeah.
And then you also have future King David labeled as a Satan. You have multiple humans labeled as a Satan. Mm-hmm. So it's more on the semantics again.
Because where is the devil in Jewish thought? It's your Yetzer Hara. It's
your proclivity to do bad shit.
Yeah. It's the side of you that does wrong is what it ultimately is to the Jewish mind. It only became a beast, a creature, because of the Zoroastrian influence outside of Judaism. It did. And I know Catholic answers, you don't want to accept this because you're so stuck in your rigid ways, but you have to step outside your paradigms eventually, because you're doing a disservice to people. You are when you teach something that is just such strict tradition that you forget that, tradition evolves too. And who are we to say that the Holy Spirit's still not guiding the church? Of course it is. The church, I know, teaches this, but yet it doesn't accept it when it happens. So anytime God were to give you a theology that clarifies something, you'd reject it right out because it doesn't match what came before. Well, of course it's not going to match what came before because it's a more enlightened, more evolved understanding. I mean, this is just the problem that I have, but it doesn't mean you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It just means that, sometimes change the bathwater from time to time so the baby doesn't get an infection. How about that? All right. What's our next one?
Next one is even demons recognize and obey Jesus immediately.
Yes. And they're saying this is not in there?
It's in the first chapter of Mark's Gospel.
Yeah, Mark chapter 1.
Mm-hmm. We know who you are, the Holy One of God. Jesus says, be silent. If they could name him, they'd have authority over him.
So what are they arguing that is in Scripture or shouldn't or is not in Scripture from this one? I'm not understanding this one.
Your understanding is as good as mine.
That's just what the dude put on the post.
Well, that doesn't make any sense at all. So let's just move on. What's our
refute that one?
Yeah, what's our next one? Because there's nothing to refute there. It's right in there. What's our next one?
All right, the next one, Yeshua wasn't a European. He was from the Middle East, dark skin, brown eyes.
Yeah, nobody disputes that either. But if you go to Ethiopia, you're going to find that all the iconography of Jesus is him as a black man. Mm-hmm. And if you go to some black churches that have representation of images of Jesus, he's going to be represented as a black man there too. And if you go to Europe, well, I mean, we all know, I think the most quintessential Catholic looking Jesus is actually one of the sons of the Borgias. I mean, look, art was the art of history and the religious art that became sort of fundamental to the church, because up until really the last 500 years, religion actually mattered to people and it was part of one's daily lifestyle. Art was always depicted as to the cultural representations of that time to be relatable to the people that it was teaching. So yeah, we always make our understand. It's just like Santa Claus, I mean, I've seen black Santas, and obviously St. Nicholas wasn't a black man, but I mean, is there a problem here if someone wants to represent an iconic figure of importance a certain way that makes them feel more comfortable or more relatable? I mean, this is all this is. But when you look at more modern pieces or depictions of Jesus, he tend to be the more of a dark-skinned Middle Easterner. And we also have to remember that, Israelite skin is very multifaceted. There's a lot of Jewish people that look whiter than I do. I mean, they really do. So skin color is, and
in a way, I mean, the most important, like I said, among the three most important things about Jesus is that he became incarnate, that he became a man.
Yeah.
And so, and that humanity that he takes on encompasses all humanity. So there's absolutely zero problem with any racial group depicting Jesus in that fashion. It makes, in a way, it's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
It's just another thing to try and pick apart. And it doesn't matter.
People object to blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus with white skin. That's the only image of Jesus objected to. They don't object to the black African images of Jesus or the Mayan inspired images of Jesus.
There's one, Father. There's one.
It's just race politics.
There's a pre-Nicene. There's a pre-Nicene sect of Christians that left for the East. We're talking like probably somewhere between the 230s to the 300s. It's interesting from a historical point of view because reading their documents and uncovering what they taught and practiced kind of shows a peek into one of the groups that existed in Christianity prior to the Nicene Creed sort of unifying theology. So you get a really rare insight. They made it all the way to Tibet. All right. Wow. And then it developed in Tibet and it became part of a Christian sect in the western parts of China, or what's today China. Okay. It was Tibet. Well, I'm not sure what it was in the year 200. I don't know what they would have called it, but it, I mean, have to look at that one. But, anyway, what's Western China today? And there are images that have been found stone tablets of scripture from this group, their own scripture, of course, their own writings, and images of Jesus. And you know what he looks like? He looks like a Buddha. He looks like, yeah, he's very Asian. He's got Asian characteristics. No one ever complains about that one either. Of course, that's not as well known, but still, it's not uncommon because of the universality of Jesus. It's not uncommon to depict him in ways that are relatable to the people that you're communicating this to. So I don't see a problem here.
Wrong to.
No.
Yeah.
But the Bible doesn't, look, the Bible doesn't say he's a white man either. It says he's a Jew. So I don't know why this would be on this list either, because it doesn't say he's a white man.
It's another non-starter.
It is a non-starter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't get this one either. But here you go. We're past time, but there's only one left. So let's finish with this next one. We'll go a little bit over, and then we'll come back, answer April's question, and then get to everyone else's tonight. So what's the last one on the list?
Last one, you say the best for last. The word rapture doesn't appear in any Bibles.
Okay, that's not entirely true, because it is somewhat it's ironic. It's actually
the
concept is in the Vulgate, but you have to understand though that they're not talking about the rapture that evangelicals are waiting for. It wasn't the same thing. There would be a caught up. First Thessalonians 4:17 says that we will be caught up. This is the parousia it's talking about. It's not talking about the tribulation where the Christians get to leave and everyone else is has to fight it out. But the Latin word for that being caught up is I'm going to butcher this because I don't pronounce this well. Rapimur, I believe, is how you say it in Latin, and it can be translated as rapture or caught up. But the concept is very much debated, and it does not imply that Saint Jerome taught this kind of rapture dispensationalism, because he didn't. Okay, so it's not entirely true to say that it doesn't appear in the Bible, but at the same time, the concept that is being taught is not in the Bible. The Thessalonians is not talking about being caught up in the tribulation to save Christians from the suffering. That's not how it works. If Jesus had to die, so do you. All right, when we come back here, we'll get to April's question and then get to all of yours. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the second hour of Vestiges After Dark. We got one more question from the ether that we're going to get to. Sort of is a continuation to, as I said in the last hour, to kind of close up our discussion on annihilationism from this season. And I thought it was such a good question that we really should give it justice and answer it. So we'll spend a little time on that. I see that there's a lot of questions in the chat, so they're all over the place, aren't they? So we'll be getting through as many of those as we can, and any others. You can also call into the show at 207-544-1983. That's 207-544-1983. Feel free to call in with any question, comment, or story that you'd like to share, and we'll take you on the air. Don't go away. right. So if you are interested in the wine we're drinking tonight, this is the wine right here. I'll leave it there for you guys to.
I love Sauterne, by by
do you like Sauterne?
Great wine. Hey, do you know what? There's famously my great food hero Keith Floyd said, "There's no wine that goes with curry, Indian food." He means, and but I think Sauterne does go. With hot food, you want something sweet.
I think a Sauterne would
and ghee as well and fat, and I
think that would be a good match for it. I also like a German sweet Riesling too. That can work with Indian food. But maybe that might actually be better because Sauterne's a little more viscous. It's a little bit thicker.
Yeah.
Which helps to kind of cut the fat, I think, a little bit when you're doing something that's buttery, like Indian food can be, and that works. Yeah, I'll have to try that sometime. Although it would be an expensive drink to have with it. Most Sauternes are pricey. It's not cheap wine, particularly to get a good, something that's got some age on it. Because
Gotta live a little.
Sauterne tastes a lot better after about 10, 15 years. I mean, you can drink it young, but you lose so much of the refinement, so it's kind of hard. This one's 20 years old, so it's really very nice color and wonderful flavor.
It was tasty.
Yeah, you like it, huh? That's your first time with it.
I do.
Yeah, great. I'm trying to get you into all the wines.
He got me drinking scotch, and now he's got me
drinking wine.
Trying all these wines.
Yeah, I got to drink the wines.
I do need to expand my palate past Cabernet Sauvignon.
Well, there's nothing wrong with Cabernet.
Oh, I don't know why. That's pretty good.
I mean, you don't really have to go much further than Cabernet. I mean, honestly, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
That's my go-to. It's like, yep, you got a cab? I'll drink it. Anything else, I'm not quite sure.
All right. What's our question? Our last question from the ether. This one's from April. Brandon, you want to do it? You want me to do it?
I can do it.
Okay.
She asks, if our pneuma returns to God, and if in that state, why do we need to be restored to our body, psyche, etc.? If that is restoring us to our former selves, wouldn't that be going back into the delusion?
Okay, so April is a student. She is asking this question somewhat from a student's vantage point because she's using some language that is more common in esoteric mysticism than it would be in Christian circles. The delusion's not something that Christians really talk about. You might find some Gnostics that talk about it, but you're not going to find traditional Christians talking about the delusion. That's more of an Eastern philosophical thing that is built into the esoteric mysticism series that I teach every Saturday afternoon. But this is, I think we can kind of answer this from multiple perspectives because this is one of the reasons why, in my opinion, annihilationism is so important to consider in one's reflection of these things outside of already what we've talked about. Because what we did not, and I perhaps meant or intended to get into this when we discussed it over the last, those last two episodes where we covered the subject. But what I didn't really get into, and I wanted to, and I should have because it's so important, is what are we talking about when we say that a person's annihilated, that the damned are annihilated? Because I think, again, Christians today tend to see let me even go back further than that. They tend to see the body, the soul, and the spirit as all one thing that makes up their identity. They don't see them as separate. They see them as their identity. The reality is your identity. Now, I'm going to sound a little bit Eastern here. I'm going to sound a little bit esoteric here. I'm not going to sound very Christian here. But the reality is your identity is a byproduct of those three things when they come together. Now, where the semantics is so important and why I don't like using words like soul and spirit is because they've been so interchangeably used that now no one really knows what you're actually talking about when you say it. It's like, well, the soul's eternal. Plato said the soul's immortal and rational. Well, what are we talking about when we say that? And what did Plato mean when he said it? And what does the church mean when they adopt that language and use it? And how do theologians from the past, the doctors of the church, how did they address it? That's where it becomes important. And right now, that I think we need to address, because one of the contention points might be that there's a contradiction. And I did meant to get to this last week, because we started off talking about one of the big elephants in the room for this theology is the church teaches the immortal rational soul that Plato gives us, and And we talked about how that happened and why that happened. But it's more important than this, because I am not actually arguing let's go through each one. Let's just go through each one and I'll explain. Okay. So we talked about how each human being, according to Christian theology, is made up of three things: the soma, which is translated as body in English, the psyche, which is translated as soul in English, but also in the concept of the ancient understanding was also the mind, which is why we get the word psychology from the word psyche, because to the ancient person, the soul and the mind were the same thing. And the world of the mind was the spiritual world. And then you have this final component called the pneuma. That is translated as spirit. That is the breath of God. So when the scripture talks about we're made in the image of God, it's large, or even better yet, says that that God breathes his spirit into us, that we are temples for the Holy Spirit. When we understand this, what we are is sort of containing the pneuma. The pneuma, because it is literally an aspect of the Holy Spirit that lives within us and is what gives life, makes life possible, animates us, gives us our ability to exist, is eternal. Absolutely. That goes on forever. That cannot be annihilated. Okay, that cannot be annihilated. So that goes back to God in the damned. Okay? Now, what about the psyche in the soma? Well, let's deal with the soma, because the soma is easier. We know what happens to the body because we get to see that part. That's the one thing we get to see at death. It decomposes. It rots away. It gets cremated, turned into ash. Even Scripture says, Ash Wednesday, remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So we know what happens to the soma. It gets wiped out, right? And then so that leaves us with the psyche. Now, a lot of people might say, well, that's got to be the seat of consciousness. That's got to be the identity. Largely, yes, but not entirely. Because the problem is that your consciousness largely comes from your brain, which is part of the soma. Now, it interacts in a unique way with the psyche, but it is not the psyche. The brain is part of the soma. Okay, so your biases, your intellections, your conscious awareness is almost entirely made up of the soma, which we know what happens to the soma, gets wiped out. So the psyche is what remains. So what is the psyche? That's what has been called soul, and from Plato's vantage point is eternal and rational. Now, I would argue it's only rational when it joins with the soma. When it has a brain, it's rational. When it loses its brain, it becomes instinctual, not rational. Now, I don't know exactly if he meant rational in the same way we mean it today. I'd have to look into that to really get a better understanding as to what he really meant by that. But for our purposes, let's just say that the eternal part's what matters. So is it eternal? Well, in a way, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Can't be annihilated, because the soul itself is the substance of the incorporeal. And that at death, the body rots away, the pneuma returns to God, that rejoins its nature. So why does the body return to the earth? Because it's made from the earth. From dust you shall return. It's made, so everything returns to its base nature. The pneuma is the part of God that resides with us. That returns to God because that's its base nature. So what's the psyche's base nature? Well, it's the archetypes. That's why I say to you, the archetypal realm is what we call the spiritual world, and all of the archetypes make up all these various spirits. And when you look at these spirits, they can always be linked to the same archetypes that Jung talked about, what we see in the tarot decks, same thing. Okay? And these are eternal concepts. Look, you might not be here forever, but I guarantee you concepts like the wise old man, the eternal child, the great mother, the trickster, the hero, the shadow will live on forever. They're eternal. And your psyche returns to those principles and lives on eternally. but not your identity in any circumstance until the resurrection. And this is why the resurrection is necessary and important to get to April's question, because you are not the pneuma, you are not the psyche, you are not the soma. You are only you because those three things came together at a very special moment in time, and by the grace of God, you are allowed to exist. And when you choose to damnation over salvation, everything returns to its base nature and you cease to be. Now, does the other thing was about annihilationism, is there eternal suffering? I think so, but not in the conscious way that you think of it. It's more in the way of there being a complete and utter separation from what it was intended to be. And perhaps there is something instinctual within the psyche that does indeed feel that instinctively, but not consciously. Okay, not consciously. It's more like these go. I know I have a paranormal audience. This is not a perfect analogy by any stretch of the imagination, but you'll relate to this. You know those ghost hauntings where it's more like it's a replay that keeps happening over and over again, like the Lady in White stories and
residual.
Yeah, residual haunting. Yeah, it's kind of like that. They are reliving the trauma, but they're not really thinking about it or experiencing it and saying, oh God, this is terrible. When will it ever end? It's just, they are forever locked in the misery of whatever it is that happened. And that energy stays there and does. That's what becomes ghosts in some circumstances. But ultimately that is an eternal principle unless God decides to stop it after the parousia, which I would argue he probably does, because that most likely gets thrown into the lake of fire too. But then again, we have to decide on what all that means, and that's beyond the scope of this question. So this is why the resurrection is important, because think about it this way. If all you were was the pneuma or the psyche or whatever, then you know what? Then you can have this erroneous Christian understanding that a lot of people have today where grandma immediately goes to heaven because she's so great. Because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you just be able to, Christ dies for your sins, and then you die and you go to heaven. You live in some incorporeal perfection some way. But that's not what the Bible teaches happens to us. That's not what the Nicene Creed teaches happens to us. That's not what Christian theology teaches that happens to us. We are resurrected from the dead. Why would God need to do that if that wasn't important? Clearly it's important to his overall plan. You know why? Because you need all those three components to come back together again in order for you to be you. In order for you to exist and to be fully aware of what you are, to have the free will that makes you what you are, those three components, the soma, the psyche, and the pneuma, must be reconstituted into the person that you are. But this time perfected, this time devoid of all of the things that brought sin into your life and made you resist God's will and grace. So in a sense, when I say annihilationism is my philosophy, I'm not talking about pneumas being destroyed or psyches being destroyed. I'm talking about egos being destroyed. I don't think you get to keep your ego without salvation. I don't. The Rosicrucians didn't teach that. The Masons don't teach that. Basically every single esoteric system in European esoteric system, going back from the earliest ones, do not teach that. In fact, they teach the opposite. They teach you have to build immortality. You have to actually build immortality. Now, they kind of sometimes take God too much out of the equation. He's there, but they don't necessarily see that's more of a working with God. So I would reject that, because as a Christian, I feel that that's part of the relationship, is to come back into him in the way we were intended to be, the way we were designed to be. So the ultimate slap in the face, you could say, to God, which it doesn't hurt him, but it hurts us, is to reject salvation, because you are literally choosing to not be what you were created for. And therefore, you cannot exist in that state. Yes, your psyche goes into some kind of eternal archetypal state. And yes, your pneuma returns to God, but that's not what he wanted. He wanted you to keep that pneuma. He wanted you to use that psyche. And he wanted your soma to become perfect in the same sense that Jesus becomes a perfected part of himself. Because remember, he took on our nature in all ways but sin. All right. So even though he didn't sin, he still had all of the weaknesses of humanity in the sense of feeling pain or being able to get sick. Jesus could still experience those imperfections because he humbled himself to our level. Just couldn't sin, but he humbled himself to be limited in that way. So in that sense, that's what resurrects in a perfect nature at the resurrection. And we also will do this. So the only real contention point is, what about the damned? Because, big surprise to some of you, the damned resurrect too. The resurrection of the dead is not just for the righteous. Everyone resurrects to judgment. What's judgment? The face of God, that in consuming fire. If you have the grace, you endure it and you live forever. You don't have that grace, well, then, we could then argue that this becomes part of the discussion of, well, maybe everything is wiped out, maybe it isn't. I can't answer that for you definitively. I have my suspicions.
Can I go back to, that's a good summary. Can I go back to the idea of ego? Because, I think, and this is a contemporary problem actually for people that, who have nothing to do with the church. There's a view of history. Look, I'm a great defender of Western civilization, not because I worship it, but because I think it's the best worst system we've got in this side of eternity. But people, I think, have a misconception that we didn't really need Christianity, or that's incidental because the Greco-Roman world was pointing in this direction. That's not true. What we have is and the significance of just the teaching of Jesus, let alone who he was, although I think because of who he was, the teaching penetrated, is actually a huge reversal of this idea of the self, of the ego. In the Greco-Roman world, decent people. There's a very famous letter of a decent Roman soldier who's writing to his wife, who actually shows rare tenderness, like he obviously loves her. And she says she's pregnant. He says, "Oh, that's fantastic news. If it's a boy, keep it. If it's a girl, put it on the rubbish tip." So this is not some evil man. This is just a normal, actually probably quite a relatively kind Roman. That's how he wrote to his wife. Well, and that's because the idea of ego was that things need to serve ourselves. Like if it serves our family, then we'll keep this baby. If it doesn't, we'll throw it away. You have the reversal of this in Jesus. So, for example, John the Baptist, when approached by followers, basically saying, who should we follow, you or this Jesus person? John the Baptist says, "I must decrease, he must increase." The word for I is ego in Greek. So the I is decreased. Then, of course, you have Jesus says, "I am," ego eimi, the I am. When does he say it? When questioned by the chief priest and Pontius Pilate. In other words, he only ever plays the I am when that I am will get him crucified, when it will lead to sacrifice. And that's why in Philippians 2, perhaps the greatest passage in the New Testament, you have this amazing paradox where we get this description of Jesus who humbles himself. In other words, the ego gets put down, humbles himself as a slave, even to death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and given him the name above all names. So in Christianity, we have this total reversal of the ego. The ego has to be completely not muffled, but by free choice, the self is offered to become Christ-like. This is theosis.
Yeah, let this mind be in you that is also in Christ Jesus. That's 2:5. Philippians 2:5, yeah.
Yeah, and the mind is the important thing. Like, the first words of Jesus are metanoite, change your mind, allow your mind to be changed. Yeah. And so ego in the context of heaven is actually that ego, the perfected ego that has been humble and that has taken on the likeness of Jesus Christ. Now, that doesn't mean that we are all identical in heaven, that we're all just like little Jesuses in heaven. That's not. You still have those things that make you distinctive, that God makes you, knows every hair on your head and all of those things. But because your ego is conformed to the sacrificial vision of what it means to serve God, neighbor, and self, it's nothing like the ego that we talk about in egomania. It's nothing like the ego of self-serving. It's the total opposite, but the transformation of that.
Yes. And so this is why, to answer April's question as to, again, just to reiterate, she says, if our pneuma returns to God, and if it in that state, and if in that state, why do we need to be restored to our body, psyche, etc.? If that is restoring us to our former selves, wouldn't that be going back into the delusion? No, we're talking about a perfected reality. So yes, in the sense that, and this is why the resurrection is the way that it is, because he could have just kept us as like little spirits, floating around in heaven. That's not the plan. The plan is to be what we are. There is importance to our corporeality. All right. So the soma is necessary. And I would say the brain too. Now, the real mystery is, how does this reconstitute, particularly after decomposition or cremation or all the other things that could happen, but that is true mystery. We don't understand all of that, but I mean, certainly with God, all things are possible. So we trust in that. And there's so much focus on this resurrection of the body, not the resurrection of the self. And even Gnostics, modern Gnostics mostly, but modern Gnostics have taken on this idea that, that's just an allegory for our ascension into the kingdom. It's like, no, it's not. In fact, that's one of the more literal things. And this is why doubting Thomas is so important as a story. It's not just about his doubt and having to have the proof. It's also about proving to us that Thomas was touching the nail marks. This resurrected body was the same one that had died on that cross. It was to emphasize that this was not a spirit. This was not a ghost. It really was the same body that came back. And therefore, this is why it becomes so essential that these three parts, soma, psyche, and pneuma, are brought together again. That is, by the virtue of that is the resurrection. That is actually what the resurrection is those three things returning to the one cohesive reality that we enjoy right now and take for granted, and continuously sin through. But we won't have to sin through that, because salvation takes that away, perfects what's imperfect in us, and removes the corruptibility, you could say. And yes, and isn't it interesting that that there was a separate word for ego, that it wasn't just synonymous with the psyche, or even the entire thing. It was its own thing. It's I would say, an accident of being alive in that very perfect way of having free will. Ego is sort of forged accidentally out of the ability to make choices and to be aware of those choices. But I don't think, I would say that only becomes eternal once we are brought into that state of resurrection and kept there. Because I do think we lose that at death. I do. I think we will experience the separation of that at death. And it won't be until the resurrection of the dead that we will feel as we do now. So when people think that they become a ghost and that they'll just be like floating around in some invisible form somewhere, watching their families and helping out here and there, and like having the same conscience, like kind of like the movie Ghost with Whoopi Goldberg and Demi Moore, yeah. Like you're not going to exist like that. I'm sorry. Your consciousness is truly locked into your brain. You'll have awareness, but it won't be like what you think. You won't be able to rationalize like you think right now. It will be a very different type of reality, not something that you can even begin to comprehend, because you've never been separated like that. The closest I could say that a person could come to experiencing that would be traumatic brain injury. They experience something that's like that. Particularly very serious ones. Have you ever met someone that's been so seriously neurologically damaged that people will kind of irreverently call them, they're like a vegetable? that vegetative state that some people unfortunately end up in after a major brain trauma is almost identical to what a ghost ultimately is. It's just instinctual. There's still feeling there, but there's no real rational thought. There's no real, this is me and I'm experiencing this and that's you and I'm watching over you. That's gone. The only time you'll experience that again is if you achieve, in my mind, at the resurrection of the dead. And we can debate as to what happens to the damned after the parousia. That's, I think, ultimately where the annihilationism episode was trying to answer, is to say eternal conscious torment versus, the eternal life of heaven. Is that eternity? Is that a gift from God, or is that innate? I would say it's not innate, only because of what we've discussed here in this question. But it does, regardless of where we could go with that, we'll leave that to maybe future future episodes to discuss. Regardless, the pneuma, the psyche, and the soma are important, and the resurrection dead brings them all back together again. I think there's a reason for that. Okay, so, all right, let's get to now your questions, because I don't want to take too much time. Now, if you guys want to talk more about annihilationism, just you guys tell me. But I know that there's other questions out there in the chat. So, Brandon, let's start with whatever question you want to start with from the chat.
So there's a good one to start off. It's from Jennifer. What does as above, so below mean? Okay,
so that is a occult axiom. Okay, that comes from the Western mystery tradition, as above, so below. So that's represented in the figure of Baphomet, which we have over here. You can see that he has one hand that points up, one hand that points down. That represents that the macrocosmos, which is the eternal cosmic principle, you could say the divine nature of God, the heavens in Chinese philosophy, perhaps you could say, is whatever happens there is reflected in the microcosm that we experience as corporeal limited beings. So when we unite as Baphomet, he's not an evil figure. They've made him evil, but when you unite in this sense that you can have one hand in heaven and one hand touching the earth, then what that gives you is a certain type of mastery to be able to manage both worlds, so that what happens in one is perfectly reflected in the other. So you could also, put it in more Christian terms, that by unifying ourselves to the will of God, the heavens, we then bring a reflection of that will into earth. So when Christians do charity, because God wills Christian charity, when he gives us the corporal works of mercy to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and heal the sick, we are literally taking in the heavens and making them reflected on earth. So as above, so below. So the perfection of heaven is brought here through us as instruments of that divine nature. But in occult terms, they kind of will often separate that from Christian theology, although not entirely, because the Western mystery tradition evolved out of Christians. It didn't evolve out of atheists or something. It was a Christian offshoot, or people that were part of it were Christians. So Christian philosophy was always part of it. It also means that we can use. Now, let me give you a pagan example. I gave you a Christian one, okay? Pagan example would be that by manifesting something on a macrocosmic level, we can make it happen in the microcosmos. So one example of this would be in tribal societies, shamanic societies. It would be common for, before a big hunt, because let's face it, if you needed to survive, you needed to eat. And food wasn't always easy to come by. You couldn't go to the supermarket and just take it out of the cellophane. You had to go and hunt it. And something had to yield its life to you, and you had to be good enough to be able to be skillful enough to be able to get it. And so sometimes you could be unsuccessful. So what they would often do is a ritual the night before a big hunt. The tribe would get together and they'd put on animal skins and wear animal horns and become the animal. Because the higher archetypal cosmic principle would be brought down into themselves so that they could manifest that success on earth. As above, so below. Okay? So it's really a reflection of that. Same thing with sympathetic magic. Okay, what do they do in voodoo, or what even witchcraft does this? You get fingernail clippings or hair clippings. You put them into a voodoo doll. You consecrate that almost in a mock baptism to be the person that is your target. Not always for evil means, by the way. You can use voodoo dolls to do good things too. If a person, I know there are voodoo priestess that I know a voodoo priestess that actually will create a voodoo doll of a client who's sick to help them become better. So she makes a voodoo doll in the same way you would to do something harmful. She does something helpful to them. And what that is because she puts the hair clippings and the fingernail clippings into the doll, it becomes a sympathetic reflection of that higher principle. So in this case, the client's the higher principle, the doll's the microcosmic lesser principle, but as above, so below. It reflects down into it. So there's multiple layers of this. Look at the sky, okay? You see galaxies, you see galactic clusters that look like neurons. I mean, when you look at what it looks like when you see these whole strings of galaxies, assuming you could come out far enough into the universe to actually look down on galaxies in that way, they would look like little neuron connections. You look at galaxies, they look like the eyes of a human being. When you look at the way planets circle or orbit a sun, it's very similar to the neutrons and protons, electrons orbiting an atom. All right, so as above, so below. So basically, we live in a microcosmic reflection of a higher cosmic principle that is outside of our understanding completely, because it's God's realm, not ours. Okay, and that's ultimately what that means. Father, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to contribute to that. I tried to put a Christian example in there.
Yeah, I mean, not really. I don't really have a dog in the fight. I mean, although you did say one thing, which, and this isn't quite on the point, but you said one thing that really, sorry, I'll keep it clean, annoys me about New Agey or neo-pagan sort of groups, which, one of my friends, he's got this narrative of somehow, the Christians invaded Britain and killed all the druids and pagans and, persecuted them and their religion. I'm like, or maybe they converted to Christianity because it was better and made more sense, which is in fact the truth. So there's no mass graves of druids in Wales or what have you. So, but yeah,
not authentic ones anyway.
No, but in other words, just like the new atheists, I mean, the sort of new age critics of Christianity are entirely dependent upon Christianity.
Yes. Yeah. They are.
It's a bit like like the new media talking about legacy media as though they're evil, but of course all of their reflections are based on reading legacy media. So
Buckland's Guide to Witchcraft. It's a real popular. It's Buckland, right? I think, if I'm saying that wrong.
I'm not sure.
It's a big blue book of witchcraft that Llewellyn published. It's very popular. I've never not seen it at a bookstore. It seems like they always keep reprinting it. But when you read through it, it's basically just a copy and paste of the Anglican service.
That's funny.
It really is just modified for pagan language. Because why? Because we don't have anything. Now, part of the reason we don't have anything is the church did destroy a lot of it. It did. I mean, the Christianization of Europe.
And also there was feedback between the two. So, but yeah, a lot of it was just. But if something works and has an intrinsic truth meaning, it will survive.
That's true.
If it doesn't, it won't.
I agree with that.
And that's been true of movements within the church as well.
And let's not forget that
when truth's not with it, it'll fade away.
And let's not forget that the pagans became the Christians, and they're the ones that chose to get rid of this older stuff. It wasn't like they were two separate groups and the church came in and said, okay, we're stealing all your books. We're going to burn everything you've got. No, they were the people that did it. They forget that.
My point.
Yeah, exactly.
My point.
Yeah. So let's not forget that one. Okay, so what's our next one? Father Chris, do you have one from the chat that you'd like to pull?
There was a brief one about the specific question was about are there other gods, and what about Jehovah's Witnesses' views on X, and again from Jennifer, I guess I'm going to give a high-handed reply, which is that we know the truth, and those things are not the truth. So very arrogantly, I'm going to tell you there is one God, and it's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Anyone that doesn't believe in that doesn't believe in the whole truth. Now, that's not to disregard what other people think or say, but to ask, what about this sect or this view or this, these people don't agree. Well, we can only teach you. Well, I can only teach you what the church has authorized. Well, I can tell you whatever I like, but I'll tell you what the authorized teaching of the church is, and this is based upon not just political whims and will, but actually we were really talking about this just now. What has been the consistent revealed truth? So you can do your own research, but Jehovah's Witnessism is a more recent incarnation of Arianism, which was a heresy which was in the backdrop of the Council of Nicaea. Mm-hmm. So you can look that up to sort of decide.
Basically, Arianism taught that Jesus was a created being. That's the big issue there.
Yeah. Half God, half man, like Apollo.
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, so what we're trying to get to is ways of interacting with what has been the revealed truth, because we believe there is a God that created all things. Because you also made reference to the Old Testament, which of course we see as part of that revelation. But we're not Marcionists. We don't dismiss the Old Testament for the New. But neither do we think that the entirety of God's revelation is restricted to the Hebrew Scriptures or the Old Testament. So it's kind of, the question is really, my answer is really about a mindset that says, literally the word Catholic is of two Greek words that means of the whole. Mm-hmm. And what we seek to do is to take in the whole of the revelation of things, good or ill, heresy and what becomes orthodoxy, and to synthesize that in a way that communicates to an age that really doesn't know these things, because we've got 3-4 generations of people who've not been taught basic Christian theology, just as part of the norm. I don't mean whichever churches you go to.
I would add to the question about whether or not these other gods exist is I could tell you what they are, to hopefully sort of bridge the gap and not completely say, well, they don't really exist. Well, yeah, that's true. They really don't exist as these divine competitors to. It's not like Jehovah's out there and he's the king of the real one. Like he's above Zeus and he's like constantly keeping Zeus down, and he knows that Zeus out there, but it's not like that. Okay. What Father Chris said is absolutely correct. There is just one God, most perfectly identified in the Holy Trinity, and how Christians identify, at least in my opinion, in his opinion, in the church's opinion, and in the opinion of 2,000 years of Western civilization, we consider that to be the best model to understand it. However, who was Zeus, and who is the Athena, and all of these other Egyptian gods? Because clearly these things were important, still are. Look at all of the gods of Hinduism, okay? But I think actually Hinduism is the way to answer this question, because most Christians would say that Hinduism is another polytheistic sect. It is not. It is not. It is actually a very much a monotheistic religion. What they see, though, is 30,000 gods, of which Jesus is actually one of them in their pantheon. And they say, well, see, that's polytheism. They got all these gods. They got tens of thousands of gods. Okay. Yeah. But what are they saying it is? Okay. So in Hinduism, you have the ultimate reality of God. Okay. That is called Brahman. Just like in Christianity, Brahman creates in his own image, and in Hinduism, people are the Atman, which is the reflection of Brahman. It, as above, so below, it's the reflection of Brahman in the physical world. So just like, it's almost the exact same theology, almost exactly the same. Okay, this is one of the beautiful things about syncretism, is that when you really look, you see that they're not really saying the same, they're not really saying different things. They're just got a lot of different semantics and a different culture to go with it. So it makes it look very foreign, but it really isn't. And this is one example. Brahman, just like in Christianity, is made up of three distinctive parts, which is Brahma, the creator aspect, Shiva, the destroyer aspect, and Vishnu, yes, the preserver aspect. In a lot of ways, you could say that's very much reflected in the creator being, or Brahma being the father. Okay, Vishnu, the preserver, is very much like the Holy Spirit. Okay, and the destroyer, Shiva, is very much Jesus. Why do you say it's a destroyer? Because of the sacrifice of the cross and because of the parousia, and that he is the one that takes on the destruction of the old heaven and the old earth. And, so in a way, Jesus is very much a Shiva figure, if we were going to try to compare the two archetypes in that sense. And that makes up Brahman. But outside of that trinity in Hinduism are all of the 30,000 plus gods that are all like Ganesha, Kali, there's all these different ones. Who are they? Okay, well, they are aspects of the functions of the cosmos that these higher principles of Brahman puts into the cosmos. So in a sense, for our modern Christian Western minds, you could say that the pagan gods are the archetypes that were worshipped and deified as deities. But they weren't not. They were just because they did not understand archetypes. But what they did understand is that archetypes were very much in control of everything they did. It's where they would have thought, well, that's got to be a god. And if you communicate with an archetype in the sense that you honor it, you give offerings to it, and they do something for you, but in a very impersonal way, because the archetypes are very impersonal, it will feel as though they've granted you their favor. But they didn't have the benefit of the Jewish understanding. And part of that's because the Jewish people really kept that very much to themselves. They did. But the rest of the world didn't really want it. So it wasn't like they were trying to keep it secret. It was just that, the rest of the world had their thing. Jews had their thing. And even in Egypt, there was a monotheistic sect for a while. So, it gets around a little bit. It was trying to poke its head through. People were starting to arrive at this understanding. But what the pagan gods are essentially, for our purposes, you can say they are people. They are the functions of God that people have deified and objectified into some kind of godlike form. Now, the things that God does exist, but when God's wrath is present in the world, we don't worship that as Christians as Mars, but pagans will. They'll be like, well, that's a deity, then we can appeal to that deity, but it's just the power of God that and you shouldn't be worshiping the power of God. You should be worshiping God that grants that power. Okay, so that's the problem. But it doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means that they're mistaken as to what they are. And because they're archetypes, and archetypes are somewhat sentient, they will behave, for our purposes, because they're so linked to consciousness, they will behave as though they are individual beings. Now, to understand this helps one to understand how thought forms are created, tulpas, egregores, and anybody interested in the paranormal could benefit from understanding how this dynamic works, because archetypes are just that powerful. You can talk to an archetype. Doesn't mean they're God, though. Now, they can do godlike things because it is the power of God, but it's actually sentient because God's will is actually sentient. Sentience is a product of the cosmos, you see. The only reason you're able to be aware of yourself is because it's part of the cosmos itself. Everything in the cosmos is sentient. Doesn't mean it's rational, and it doesn't mean it's conscious. It just means it's sentient.
Every
it
time
is aware.
you speak to a therapist, you're speaking to an archetype.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's really their job is to help you see that.
Mm-hmm. It is. And it's really just basically a way to bridge ancient thought with modern psychology and to put it into a package that the way we think today, we can understand it and make it work. So, I would say pagans don't need those gods anymore. They've got a better option now. But, some people think they've been wronged by the church and they've got all these different reasons. And so they go on these rebellious pursuits and take that into their spirituality. So, I guess maybe worshiping the power of God is better than not worshiping God at all. But, it is a mistaken thing. It really is. And I would say that oftentimes paganism done for the right reasons, can actually lead one back to a truer understanding of God down the road. So I never really criticize pagans for their current state. I don't see them as lesser than me. I don't look down on them. And I would never criticize them for their beliefs. I see that as a direction in the life of God that hopefully will enlighten them even further, to get a better understanding for themselves as to whatever that might mean. So, overall, I have great relationships with pagans. We even have pagan benefactors in our church. Mm-hmm. We do. We have benefactors that have been donating to this church for years that are pagan. And you know what? I think they wouldn't do that if they didn't see value in what this church does. And I think what this church has done for them is, instead of dismissing them and saying that they're wrong and you're going to hell for it, we say, you're on the path.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk. Yeah. How's your experience with this? And what does it lead to? And then I will share that this is what I think and you know what? Not one has ever said, you know what, Bishop, you're completely wrong. I'm not worshiping the powers of God.
You share a shared experience and you extrapolate from that,
Everyone has said to me, and you've been there for some of these conversations, every single one has said to me, you know what, you're right, these are archetypes. And where do the archetypes come from? It comes from a higher principle. That's what we call God. Maybe you don't want to call it God, but you are right. But all the pagans recognize there is a higher principle. And that's the beauty of Hinduism, is that they've always recognized that it's just one higher principle that can be reflected in numerous different faces. And they do interact with those individual faces. But even Hindus would know that these are archetypes that they're interacting with. They're not really interacting with something that is in competition to the one true God, which is Brahman to them. And I personally don't think there's a difference between Brahman and the God of Christians, the Trinitarian God of the Christians. I don't think there's a difference between the two. I really don't. I think they're the same God. I absolutely do. Now, I know evangelicals would fight me on that one, but, when you really break it down, you see...
there is only one job. There is only one God.
Yeah, so, right. And if they recognize that this is the one God, that's what they call him, I'm not going to dispute that. So there you go. That's a great question, though. Jamie, have you seen one that you want to grab?
It goes back to the Baphomet. Jennifer asked, who or what actually is Baphomet? Because obviously, like most of us, we were taught that it's a satanic symbol growing up, and it's absolutely the opposite.
It became a satanic symbol when the Church of Satan, I think it was either the Church of Satan or the other one.
Satanic Temple adopted it back in the 70s, was it?
I get them all mixed up, but one of the satanic groups, one of the bigger satanic groups, did grab this symbol because it's a very devil-like looking creature. And then there is some lore behind it. There was some urban legends, if you can call them that, or myths back in medieval times. Yeah, there it is. Medieval times of the Knights Templar being disbanded by the Pope, and many of them were actually executed for pagan beliefs and profane beliefs. And
supposedly this was an altar.
they was apparently found on the altar. Yes, and that was, I think, largely written off to myth and not actual history. But it's an occult symbol, and it's actually a fairly modern thing. It's the occultists. I will look for it. Just make sure I'm saying the name right. Let me bring it up. Eliphas Levi. Eliphas Levi. Yeah. He was the one that actually constructed the image, as I understand it. And it was to represent the as above, so below principle. It was a personification of that principle. So it's not the devil. It's not even closely related to the devil, not on any level. And the horns are not devil horns. The horns are representative of wisdom that leads into cosmic wisdom that leads down into the mind. That by raising one's mind to the heavens, we absorb that cosmic wisdom.
That's why you have the flame above his head.
Yes, and it's also an androgynous figure. If you notice, he's got breasts, but also a penis.
Yeah.
And the penis is erect, representing the potential of will, because. Surprise, surprise! But all you parents out there that bought your little girls magic wands and for Halloween to go around as a princess,
very phallic.
It's a phallic. It's a phallus. A magic wand is a penis, erect penis, to project through the orgasmatic ecstasy one's will into the world. So a magic wand is basically a erect penis. So you might want to either come to terms with that and be like okay with it because that's what it is, or if you have a problem with it, maybe you shouldn't get your little girls magic wands anymore and teach them not to be wanting to be fairies or witches or whatever. I don't know. But no, and regardless, Baphomet's not a real. It's not an entity. It's not a spirit. It's not a demon. It's not the devil. It is a principle that's been given a anthropomorphized principle. That's it. It's the as above, so below, anthropomorphized into an image of an archetype, a being. And yes, it is used in tarot cards for the devil, but remember what the devil represents, constraint.
We prefer on earth as it is in heaven.
Yes.
Yeah, and that, in a way, that is the same thing, right? But
I wrote that earlier.
It means the same thing. It does mean the same thing, but I think Jesus said it better, and that's his words, not ours. So, let's go with Jesus on that one. But if you're a Christian, don't be afraid of Baphomet. Baphomet, that's silly. Okay, that's silly. It's not a demon. All right, Brandon, what's our next one?
So next question comes from Val. She asks, after my previous husband passed away, he called the landline, which showed on the caller ID. I froze and no message was left. How was that possible?
All right, we'll answer this one, then we'll go to break. So that is actually a very common, a somewhat common thing. Even my own family experienced something similar to this. I can give you that story if you're interested. Let me know. But this is actually something that happens often, and particularly in the modern era. This is something that seems to be happening more frequently because now everyone's got caller ID. I remember back in the days in the 80s where you had to pay extra for that service. Mm-hmm. You had this little plastic box that you set on top of your phone where it would show the number coming up, and we thought we were so cool for being able to see that. Star 69 and call them back. Yeah. And so what this seems to be, okay, is remember what I told you about death? Okay. Again, we tend to think in very black and white terms. So, either you're alive, then you're dead. In medical science wants to proclaim death occurred at, 1200, 3 hours or something. It's always like we have these definitive concepts. Nothing's definitive. Nothing. Death is a process that unfolds over time. That's why the Buddhists won't even touch a body for 3 days, or at least they're not supposed to, after death, because it takes about 3 days for things to start to settle. All right? There's a lot of confusion and stuff. And so in those initial days of death, even though the body might not be showing any signs of life and that brain is not active in any way that could be detected, I can guarantee you that that person's soul, their psyche, is very much active and having experiences through that time and trying to figure out how to rationalize without the brain what they're experiencing, because all they are now is instinct. Okay, so what they will do is instinctively produce manifestations that correspond to their quest for understanding. And that can even be projected into the phenomenal world and affect usually technology, because technology is a little more ethereal. It operates on electrical principles, which are incorporeal principles and can be affected. This is why paranormal equipment works when it scientifically has no valid reason to work. All right, there's really no reason why an SB7 or an Ovilus should do anything at all. But the reason these things produce results, and that certain paranormal investigators will swear by them, even though hardcore scientists will say that's all bullshit, it's pseudoscience, there's no validity to it, is because that the electrical environment that is made up of the electromagnetic system all around us can be manipulated by these forces. When a person's recently deceased, they're very much still connected to that. And so you can sometimes have manifestations, and what it will manifest as is what that person knows. So perhaps in this particular state, this husband, was a former husband?
Yes.
Okay. Was trying to reach out to you, trying to call you. And so what it did was produce a manifestation of, what do I need to do to call? Well, it still has the image of that. It can still produce the image. I need to call. I need to get information. I need to make a phone call. I need to call my wife. And that will produce a corresponding effect. So as above, so below. Same principle at work here in this. And that's what explains a lot of these strange paranormal after-death experiences. We've gone a little bit over here. We're going to take our next break, our last break, actually. And when we come back, more of your questions. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to Vestiges After Dark. This is the third and final hour and your last chance to get a question, comment, or story into us by calling into the show at 207-544-1983. That's 207-544-1983. Or we'll just be continuing to take your questions from the chats. That's fine, too. All right, when we come back here, more from whatever it is that's on your mind. Don't go away. Okay, so Moosh had followed up on that question that she asked before the break. So he actually called home. And I responded in the chat. His psyche did. Yep. And this goes to show you just how seductive your conventions are. Because again, it's still easy to keep seeing as these afterlife realities and all the individual parts that split and go their separate ways as still the same thing. They are not the same thing. So this is not Moosh's husband calling her. It's the psyche residual calling her, which is very different than the person she knew when he was alive. It is only at the resurrection of the dead where her husband will be reconstituted into the person that he was. And then the final judgment, which is not, by the way, Jesus being like, oh, you got too many sins, you're going to hell. Oh, wait, you've done enough. You can go in. It's not like that. Not that kind of judgment. Okay. The judgment is the face of God. Can you endure it? Can you face God face to face and live? If yes, that's salvation. If not, well, that's hell. And you know, like I said, we can debate till we're blue in the face as to what annihilationism has in store for us after that. But overall, I don't care about annihilationism as much as I care about eternal life. And that's the one that I focus on. It's the one that you should be focused on. And I'm confident that a great number of us will achieve to it if we try. All right, if we pursue the will of God. All right, the sacraments, His grace, and an understanding of the cross. I think that's half the battle right there. Okay, Brandon, what's our next question?
So this question comes from Facebook, from Sandra. I think we briefly touched on it earlier, but we can just
you kind of answered it.
Okay.
Yeah, and do you think that when we die, we have no consciousness?
Yes, but again, that's not a definitive lack of consciousness. There is something that's far deeper, which is instinctual awareness. Now, we're not used to that one because we're focused. We always are processing everything through a brain. But if you do meditation, you know, you'll start to experience what it's like to be able to think without rational thought, without having to use your brain to intellectualize everything. That's actually what meditation is teaching. And that's how Buddhists teach their practitioners how to overcome attachments, because your brain is what makes the attachment, right? I mean, your brain is what attaches to people, feelings, impermanent things that cause suffering. But when you liberate yourself from that, you then arrive at a deeper understanding that is more perfect. And Christians would even consider that to be entering into the will of God, or a type of theophany in a way. I mean, I would say they're the same realities when you hear them described, but no, there's no consciousness with that. It's something much greater than consciousness, because it's not being individuated through an ego that makes mistakes. Okay. Now the problem is we become what we cultivated in life. So if you spent your entire life jealous and a nasty, bitchy son of a bitch of a person, okay, then that's what you become in death. That's all you are. You don't have a choice to be like, well, I'm going to be a better person now. Or, you know what, I'm feeling good today, so I'm not going to be so cruel. If cruelty is how you live, then cruelty is what you become. That's not like now you're this eternal cruel spirit. I'm saying that you become cruelty itself. There's no consciousness in that, but there is definitely awareness in that. Cruelty is aware of what it does. Cruelty is worse than evil. Honestly, I think it's actually the true evil. Cruelty is suffering and the infliction of pain and suffering and destruction for pain, suffering, destruction's sake. There's nothing more evil than that, because, you know, certain things can be philosophically debatable. There's moral judgments that you sometimes have to make. Ethics are not always so clear, but cruelty, there's no justification for it. It's just for the sake of being just cruel. For the sake of it. Yeah. So I say cruelty is one of the worst evils. All right. So, but that if you lived a life of cruelty, then you become cruelty. You become the very embodiment of cruelty. There's nothing left to you. There's no person there anymore. There's no thought process there anymore. It's just cruelty is what you are. And that's the psyche. The psyche becomes absorbed by the archetype that they represented in life. Just like, though, what about a person who lived a great life and died? They were charitable. They lived a life of love, but did not cultivate salvation, didn't care about it at all, didn't even believe in God. Just by virtue of being a good person is not enough to get you to heaven. And being a good person is not enough. There has to be relationship there. There has to be a conscious development in life when you have that conscious ability to pursue it. Being a good person is not enough. So what happens to you? Well, the psyche gets absorbed into the archetypes of charity, and it becomes charity itself. Not a bad thing, but I wouldn't say that that's an afterlife. You're not sitting in some cloud somewhere being like, isn't this great? We're in the, it's charity all around us and God's here. No, you're not aware of it. You're just become charity. Instinctual awareness. But it's always through the lens of the higher principle. There's no you there. It's no ego. There's no identity to it. All right. It's just you become now a process. And this is very metaphysical. I'm not teaching theology at this point. Theology doesn't cover this really. Buddhism does, but not Christian theology. So, it's not a bad question, honestly, because there is much more that could be said about that. And I'm glad that it was asked because maybe that qualifier was needed. So I would say, no, consciousness does not exist after death. Until the resurrection of the dead. Because you need your soma to be conscious. Consciousness requires brain function. Okay? And that's proven scientifically because we know what happens when a brain is so badly damaged that it does not function. You can map consciousness. We have equipment today that can actually see consciousness functioning within the brain and what happens when it doesn't have it. All right. So consciousness is definitely not a property of the psyche. It is the psyche with the soma is what produces consciousness. Okay. But doesn't mean you won't have it again. Just doesn't mean you have it at death until the parousia. Now, for your purposes, the parousia is, I'm going to get very philosophical now. This is, again, not theological, not even metaphysical. This is just pure philosophy. Philosophically speaking, the parousia is instant at death. It must be because from your purpose, if you don't have consciousness and rationality, you're not going to be tracking time. And time, you're already entering into a timeless state anyway, because time's really only a relevancy here. It doesn't really hold weight beyond the construct of this reality, whatever this is. So from Jesus' standpoint, when he says it's finished, he means it. It's done. The world's already been restored. That's why the question of why does evil still exist is kind of silly, because it's like, well, it really doesn't. And so you keep dwelling in this one moment in time that's already truly past. You just can't let it go. So you keep evil. And that's what sin really is. It's just holding on, right? It's a type of attachment. So in the end, you're gonna wake up restored. So in a way, it's instantaneous. No time period. You're going to assume that the linear continues on into death. It doesn't. The linear is only relevant here, and that's only because we only understand what it means to be created and to die. You wouldn't even have a concept of linear time if it weren't for the fact that you die. That's why I say, what is the fallen universe? It's the introduction of time. That's what the fracture is, because now instead of a whole moment, the wholeness of God, now we experience individual moments that come and then end.
That's explicit. It's explicit in Genesis.
It is.
In Eden, you've got everything. As soon as you're cast out of Eden, you'll have to toil and die.
Yeah.
That literally is the definition of time, really.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. You have this perfect moment that lasts forever, and now why don't they need to eat, right? Why don't they need to suffer? Because there's no time in which for things to pass. You're not subject to entropy. We introduced entropy. Really, if you want to get really modern in our interpretations of Genesis, you could say that the penalty for sin, which you could say, instead of calling it sin, you could just say unhealthy attachment to impermanent things, is the consequence of that is entropy. I mean, it means the same thing. It's just these are more modern terms that maybe a not so religious oriented person could maybe better understand it that way. So I say it just in case there's one of you out there that thinks religion's bullshit. Well, here's a way of looking at it without having to go through all the religious stuff. I'm all for that. If that is what speaks to you, then that's fine.
I agree with that. And I've just spent, I mean, one of my hobbies at the moment is I engage in the political world, and people that, are asking questions about what can Western civilization continue, or these sorts of questions. And I keep asking them, classical liberals, to use that term, John Stuart Mill type people, but who are overwhelmingly, they're not like they're not the new atheists, they're just sort of agnostically atheist people because they're products of that culture. I keep asking them, do you not see that without Christianity, all the things that you value in classical liberalism literally cannot exist? Like that's the foundation. Christianity, the Enlightenment can happen because of Christianity. Those two things interact to produce this, favorable culture compared to all the others that we've experienced. And of course, their answer is generally that they'll be honest and say, I'm not really qualified to talk about that, or I've not really thought about it, or I kind of like Christianity, but I don't believe anything myself. And so in order to getting back to what you just said, I take a really minimalist view and say, you're not an atheist. We're all here, and even when we're arguing and debating, it's because you believe there is a truth that can be found. There is in other words, there is an objective truth. And of course, St. Thomas Aquinas, Thomistic thinking says, if you believe there is something that is a truth that can be grasped at, then ultimately you believe in the source of all truth. Therefore, you are in fact a believer in God. It's just that you want to call it truth, or you want to call it, but
I think most people that call themselves atheists are objecting to a old man in the sky motif. They're not necessarily objecting to a higher reality or some kind of higher principle.
Aspects of religious practice.
Sky Daddy.
To that.
Yeah, they are, right. Yeah, because I think they see that as a human construct.
And fundamentally, of course, I mean, the cynic in me says that they're also rejecting anything that requires anything of them.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So I go with that. Is there an objective truth? And that's the sort of reversal. Not that we go back to Eden, but if we're saying that the fall from Eden leads to this entropy, the opposite of that is that actually in time we can pursue truth, which actually leads us back to the face of God.
Yep.
Well, I can tell you, being in a coma or being in the Bardo, near that experience here, there was no time. It's so hard to explain.
Mm-hmm. But you had enough awareness to know that.
I had enough awareness to know that there was just consciousness.
But you didn't.
There was existence, but there wasn't any kind of concept of time.
And see, that's the thing I'm trying to get at, because you can explain this better than I can because you lived it.
Yeah.
You said that you immediately cried out to, was St. Michael?
St. Michael.
And that's when you felt that this hand pulled you out. Okay. Yeah. You weren't sitting around in walking through these tunnels being like, I wonder if I call on Jesus.
I was floating above my body, and then there was no body. It was just me.
Yes.
But it was just blackness, but it was me. And I remember the torment started, and that's when I called out to Christ, and I called out to St.
But you did that instinctively.
It was instinctive.
It wasn't like a conscious thought, like maybe if I do this, I'll get a good result.
No,
it was instinct to say, this is the course that I take.
It very much was, yeah.
Yeah, and you can only really rationalize it after you came back, where you can go back and say, well, this is the memory I had. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like being in a dream. You don't really unless you're having a lucid dream, you don't really make conscious decisions in a dream. You have experiences, but you can't really choose or rationalize any of it until you come back to being awake, when you can go back and reflect on it. Unless it's a lucid dream, it's just an experience with feeling and its depth of feeling. And they're usually very powerful if you have a really good dream.
That's why most dreams fade so quickly when you wake up,
Yeah.
unless it's a lucid dream.
You're right, because your consciousness immediately supersedes it
Yep.
again. But that's kind of what I'm trying to describe it as. I guess the best way to describe it for people that are really curious, like, what do you mean there's no consciousness? Well, this is what I mean. I'm not saying there's no experience. I'm saying that you're not consciously aware of it in the way that you are right now, very much like a dream. When you're in a dream, you're just having the experience. You are the experience, in fact. There's nothing else but the experience. Okay, very different than waking life, where you're having to, manage your time, figuring out what you got to do here and do there, and there's this bill to pay, and then, I got to go get this thing done. You're making all these conscious decisions in your waking state. That becomes very much an intellectual exercise. When you're dreaming, it's just a passive experience, largely outside of your control. And that's death. That's what it's like to be just the psyche. Because you know what? Dreams, it's the psyche. Your soma just goes completely out. Your pneuma is not an experiential thing. It's an animation thing. And the psyche is what has experiences. But without the brain, and without the brain being in its normal functioning state, it can't consciously be aware of it. That's why you're only aware of a dream after you wake up. And like she said, you lose it very quickly, usually, unless you write it down.
It always It amazes me how freely people share their dreams. Because I think, you're just telling me who you are.
Yeah, it tells you a lot about them, right? Yeah. Because honestly, what did Jung say about dreams? People always ask me, what does the dream mean? What does that dream mean? And I don't take a real theosophical view on dreams. Like, I don't necessarily think they mean anything other than, that it's a self-reflection of you. So
Most of it's just defragging your brain.
well, a lot of it is, but when you meet someone in your dream, it is never a person. It is always an aspect of you. Yeah. So let's say you're dreaming that you're being chased. That's a common dream when you're under a lot of stress. You're dreaming that you're being chased by something that's out to get you, out to kill you. That person who's chasing you is an aspect of you, something that you're not liking about yourself, typically. Sometimes it's just something that you don't like about your life that has become personified in this thing. But it's never a monster. It's never a person. It's like, even if you dream about your spouse or your children, it's probably not them that you're dreaming about. You're dreaming about something that they represent within you that's manifesting under their face. That's how the psyche works. It's all archetypal. All right. So the soul is entirely an archetypal reality, and it's an archetypal experience. So, I think when the Jews talk about Sheol being this kind of like dreamlike unconscious state, I think that's spot on, because that sounds just like the psyche to me. It's unconscious, but it's a dreamlike state. So you're something's happening. Nothing you can control anymore, but something's happening and you're experiencing it, but you're not really conscious.
Along for the ride.
Just along for the ride, yeah. It's kind of hard to describe, but hopefully those examples help. What's our next one? You see one, Jamie? Or
the last one I saw was the last one I talked about.
Okay.
I think someone was asking
someone's
about
asking what Brandon's
for Halloween.
plans are.
Brandon's Halloween plans. So go for it, Brandon. I'll take a break here. I could use it.
So me and April will be going with a couple other people to the Civil War Field Hospital that we help host investigations with, and we're going to be hopefully staying all night and probably catch something. Hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like a website or a channel on YouTube where you share your findings, or do you just keep that internally?
I have a Facebook page and April has one. Mine's been dormant for several months. She is more active on hers. She has a TikTok and everything else. I think I do. I don't know. I'll have to check. But no, most of the stuff that we get or that people share with me, I normally keep in like my iCloud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, look for April's Facebook out there, I guess. It's a public page?
Yes. I can put it in the group or in the chat.
Okay.
It's Curious Things Investigations.
Oh, okay. There you go. Look it up.
Yeah, you can find her on TikTok under that.
Cool. Yeah. See some stuff.
Also, I will extend the question to you all. What are your plans for Halloween?
Jamie, what are you doing?
Well, I'm leaving for Illinois Sunday, and so Halloween night, probably gonna such a miser. Probably gonna close my gate and not take trick or treaters, which I doubt I'd have any anyway out where I'm at. And I'm gonna have some bourbon and relax because I have mass the next afternoon at noon, and then mass again at 7, and then I gotta drive 900 miles home Sunday.
Sounds like
Illinois. So it'll be a quiet ghoulish night with some bourbon and maybe some scary movies or something.
That works. That works. Father Chris, do you do anything for Halloween?
Not really. I did when I was a kid. I mean, I was a trick or treater and all that sort of thing. No, I mean, my wedding anniversary is on the 30th of October.
Oh.
And so now my wife's out. She's booked for that evening, so we're gonna celebrate our wedding anniversary on Halloween. So how about that?
Okay,
Sounds
that
like
works.
fun.
Hey,
Yeah.
that works. We do what we do every year. We essentially go over to my sister-in-law's house because they live in a very large neighborhood with a lot of little houses that it's really a great place to just trick or treat. It's an enclosed kind of neighborhood where,
They don't really do it in Australia.
They don't really do it. Yeah, it's more of an American thing, I think, mostly now.
Hey, as kids, we used to go to the
became English.
Yeah.
we used to all group up and go to the nice area of town and trick or treat.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they had the full size candy bars, yo.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true.
Popcorn balls. I mean, all the good stuff.
We don't live our house now. See, we live in the woods, and we don't have neighbors. So
kind of the same situation with me.
Yeah.
I won't have anybody coming in.
there's just, and I don't want the property open
here, so
Yeah.
no one's going to come here anyway.
Right. So this would not be a good place to, not even be open to trick or treaters. When we lived in neighborhoods, we would do trick or treat things. But so we go over to my sister-in-law's, and Levi still goes and does it. He gets, gets dressed up as something. He's a little under the weather right now, so hopefully he'll still be able to do it, feel better by Friday. But yeah, he plans to go, trick-or-treating. I always carve a pumpkin. I carve a traditional-looking jack-o'-lantern, and Tracy usually carves a Sonic jack-o'-lantern. I think we typically post those to Instagram, so you'll see them up there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. He goes trick-or-treating, then once he's done with that, we just go sit back on their porch and watch the trick-or-treaters come, and it's just like one after another for several hours. It's like that kind of neighborhood. So it's a great place to go for it. Georgia really gets into it, but usually in the neighborhoods. It's not really kind of like if you live off of a main street, if you're not part of a subdivision, you tend to not see much activity. But it's fun for what it is to watch it. I mean, for me, Halloween is really all Saints and All Souls Day. That's what I've always seen Halloween as. Even when I was a kid, I never really went trick or treating ever. It was really just more understanding the spiritual aspects of it. But I was always very much aware of the thinning of the veil. That's for sure. So, I had an intrinsic feeling. But I mean, I was really kind of an ass when I was a kid. I remember.
Kind of.
Yeah, one time, I got it in my head to hide in the bushes, and as the trick or treaters came by, I sprayed them with the hose. Yeah, I was an asshole. Yeah, it was kind of.
I've always been perfect.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, we never did any egging or TPing or anything like that.
Yeah, it was just I just couldn't resist.
When I was a cop, I don't know about you, Jamie, but when I was a cop, Halloween was a freaking nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They wouldn't bring us in if we were off, but they would have you kind of on standby in case people lost their minds. Up in was it Detroit where they do Hell Night? Do they still do Hell Night? I'd be worried about working up there.
I don't think I'd want to be doing too much Halloween in Detroit. Yeah.
I don't want to go to Detroit for anything.
Well, there's an annual Hell Night. I believe it's Detroit, somewhere up in Michigan. Chat, help me out. Where they do a Hell Night every year on Halloween, and they literally, it's almost like open chaos.
Look at Six Flags over Georgia. Don't they do one? Or they're not doing it this year?
That's Fright Night.
Fright Night. Yeah.
Fright Night. Yeah.
Well, that's our Halloween plans.
Yep.
Do we have
bourbon and B movies?
That works. Do we have any other questions? We still got some time here.
So I actually got a question since we're on the subject. What is a brief history of Halloween, and why is it that here recently you see this post with this ex-Satanist or ex-satanic priest saying Halloween is a one-night stand with the devil? What's the actual history of Halloween?
Halloween's actually a Catholic thing. It's not a pagan thing at all.
I mean, you got
Samhain.
Samhain, but I mean, but that was different than what I mean, it's you could say it is a bit of a merging of the two holidays. You know, the All Saints and All Souls being sort of written into the past pagan festivities, but no, I mean, I'm not really the best one to ask this. I mean, Father Chris might know more about its actual origin, but I do know that a lot of the legends and the traditional things we do have their roots in actual things that meant something. For example, the dressing up in costumes was so that the dead that were able to walk the earth on that one night, right before all the saints would close up the doors, you could say, they would identify you and could cause you harm. So if you dressed as one of them, as a ghost or as some kind of monstrous thing, you could either float under the radar and they just think that you're one of them walking the earth, or you could maybe scare them even. And that's what the jack-o'-lantern was for, is that it was kind of designed to scare away, as a talisman almost, the spirits from a particular home. But the dressing in costumes was really just idea that the veil is thin at this time of year. That probably does come from the Samhain kind of background, but I mean, that was more of a harvest feast anyway, wasn't it? It wasn't really so much about the dead. I don't think, or maybe some ancestral worship took place at that time. But overall, because the church celebrates All Saints and All Souls back to back on November 1st and 2nd, and Halloween literally means the eve of All Hallows of the Saints.
All Saints.
Yeah, All Saints.
I'm sorry. The whole thing is totally Catholic and Christian.
Yeah.
The idea, sort of neo-paganism grabs onto it in the Samhain tradition, but that's not the origin of this. The origin is, even of dressing up, it goes back to the souling plays of medieval times. Mm-hmm. So, they'd have on the eve of like you said, it's All Hallows Eve. Mm-hmm. It takes in the whole sort of gamut of the church, to use traditional terms, the church militant, suffering and triumphant. So the church on earth, the church in purgatory, and the church in heaven. And it's a sense that we sort of act out the coming together of these, because we have these great days where we have the vigil was often the party. All Saints Day was the mass for All Saints, and of course All Souls, the mass for the holy souls in purgatory, the church suffering. So they'd have souling plays to, again, a pre-literate culture, to act out the various, teachings or interpretations of church teaching of heaven, hell, and purgatory. So that's the origin. Jack-o'-lanterns, Irish Catholics brought that to America. They would carve crosses in them. So yeah, this is entirely a Catholic thing, which is why when Christians get worried and upset about it, I just laugh.
You have to.
It might be also why the Orthodox don't like it, because it isn't part of their culture.
It's Catholic.
Yeah, it's very Catholic. Yeah, they don't like that. I mean, Orthodox really don't involve themselves with it. They take a very almost Protestant stance towards it. Honestly,
really?
They do.
Huh.
Yeah, they don't like it. And they certainly don't like, and well, even the Catholic Church doesn't like people dressing up like devils and ghosts. And they say be something, but why don't you dress up like a saint, they'll say. That kind of defeats the purpose for some people, because it is sort of a macabre holiday. It's a horror holiday.
I mean, you could be Saint Teresa of Avila and go around with a skull.
Well, you could be Saint Dennis and have your head chopped off and carry it with you. I mean, there's some options. We have Saint Lucy carried her eyes. She.
But traditionally, Catholics would also do cemetery visits.
Yes.
So all of these things are, you now see these things dramatized into 19th, 20th century romantic Gothic kind of images, but cemetery visits are not supposed to be morbid. It's where you go and pray for the souls.
Yeah,
of
it
the
was
faithful departed.
Yep.
They weren't visits of non-cemeteries. They weren't like pagan burial piles. It was these were Christian burials. So yeah, I mean, obviously, what it's morphed into, dressing as Superman. Again, I don't really care. It doesn't bother me. But
No.
If you're going to faithfully observe Halloween, then you should do that, praying for the holy souls. In many ways, dressing as a skeleton has more to do with it than dressing as Superman.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've never had a problem with it. And it's not something I participated in, but not because I didn't like it. It was just,
loved it.
It was, I kind of enjoyed the shenanigans part of it more. Yeah, I was more about the trick than the treat.
When I was a kid, that was on one day a year where I got to dress up as one of my favorite heroes, or got to be somebody else all night. And
Yeah.
then get candy at the end. So
We probably could do one more question if it's a good one and quick one. Do we have one, Brandon? You see one?
let's see one on here.
So I think we finished the questions in the chat, but April did have a good one on the network.
Okay.
That shouldn't take too long. She asked, can spirits, or since we're on the topic, can spirits, demons, ghosts, etc. kill you? They're always showing that on TV or movies.
Yeah, that's a good one. You look, remember what we talked about? This is actually really applicable. Remember we talked about the psyche and how it diverts or sort of absorbs at death into the archetype that it most closely resembled in life. Okay. We all resemble something in life, like let's say you didn't achieve salvation, God forbid, and you just die, your psyche would most likely be absorbed in some hero archetype because you have that archetype as part of your entire nature. You spent your life as a cop, then you're in the military. You have this call to service. You really do, and by nature want to help people in crisis, and you're protective by nature. So all of that, your psyche would return to that state. That's the archetype that it would be sort of absorbed back into.
Sounds exhausting.
Yeah, it does. But that's most likely what your psyche is a product of. And so that's its base nature. And remember, we go back to our base nature. So when a person dies, then we become part of the archetype that we cultivated in life. And so if we spend a lot of our life being absorbed in very dark and death-related like things, if we become very absorbed by that, that's what Gothic culture can be somewhat dangerous. Vampirism can be somewhat dangerous because it is a sort of exercise in that energy of death. We take that energy in, and it will manifest because that's what archetypes do. They manifest into their core parts. And as they become part of us, we become part of them. And so a lot of times these darker spirits or these demonic spirits or things we would classify as the demonic are manifestations of sin, which is what is sin? Sin is basically the exercise in death. There is the energy of death. And so these are personifications of death that come into our lives and sort of bleed that energy into us and becomes absorbed into us. Now we're going to experience that as sickness, or even eventually, if we don't do something about it, could lead to death. That's not a spirit coming in to kill you. It's not like the demon's like, I'm going to go kill him. It's just the energy is not conducive to life. The archetype is not conducive to healthy living, and therefore we start to become part of the archetype we spend our time with, which is why it's not healthy to be depressed all the time. Why do depressed people not flourish in life? Why does, when an older person spends too much time depressed, that they don't live as long? Because they take on that dark energy and it starts to become them, and eventually it wins. And so we don't want that to happen. We shouldn't want that to happen anyway.
It's like being exposed to radiation.
It is. It's like it. Well, Brandon, you said it. That I guess I said this at an earlier time, but it's not murder, because murder requires a conscious decision. It's like cancer. You acquire a disease that eventually slowly consumes you, and that's how these spirits can harm us. But it's not them making a conscious decision to say, I'm going to go and get that person. No, it doesn't work like that. Good question though. So we're at the end of the show, and I want to just say thank you, all of you, for the great questions. You got us through, and I always like these. This is the last one this season, unfortunately, unless there's a problem. Hopefully not, but we will, of course, continue to have these, and next season for sure. Next week, though, we have James Ferreira coming on the show. He's been a returning guest. I think this will be his third appearance on this show. He's the guy that talks about tarot. Good friend of ours, and he's going to be talking about invoking angelic forces, angelic guides, he calls them, to aid you in your divination with the tarot. So kind of a new agey topic next week. I think that'll be fun. But he takes it from a deeper perspective. So I think you all will enjoy what he has to share about that. That's next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Jamie will not be with us because, as she said, she's going to be
traveling.
Yeah, yep. But she'll be with us in spirit. You can watch the rerun.
Absolutely will. You know I will.
Yes. Brandon, thank you. Father Chris, thank you. Jamie, thank you. A big thanks to all our moderators and all of you who support this show. Remember, we couldn't stay on the air without your support. So if you like the show, please remember to donate at esotericcatholic.org. Click donation button, and a pledge would be wonderful. If you could give a monthly pledge, that would be fantastic. We do not take ads to keep the show on the air, and remember, our topics are not popular, so the algorithms don't promote us either. You have to do that. That has to be your job. Okay, so thank you all, and we'll see you out there in the ether. God bless everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.